the welfare of society and the just government of men and women, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor us, your servants, whom you have called to the performance of important trust in these islands. Father, let your blessing descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of these islands and of those whose interest you have committed to our charge. And this we beg in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. May the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the love of God and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. Please be seated. Item number 2, confirmation of minutes. I call on Senator Tannock.
Madam President, I move that the minutes of the meeting of Wednesday, the 26th of November, 2025 be taken as read.
Is there any objection to that motion? Yes, Senator Cunningham.
It's just a very small nitpicky item, but on page 3 at the top of the second column, the timings are off. So it goes from 11:10 to 11:12 to 11:10. But other than that, no issues.
With that correction then, Senator Tannock.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Senator Cunningham. As amended, I move that the minutes of Wednesday, 26 November 2025 be confirmed, and that's as amended, as pointed out by Senator Cunningham.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The minutes are confirmed with that correction. Thank you, Senator Tannock. Item number 3, messages, Mrs. Beal.
There are no messages, Madam President.
Thank you, Mrs. Beal. Item number 4, reports of committees. There are none. Item number 5, announcements. Senators, I would like to announce that we've had apologies from Senator Vice President John White, who gives his apologies for his absence today. The next announcement is in the name of Senator the Honorable Kim R. Wilkinson, Attorney General, Minister of Justice, and leader in the Senate.
Good morning, Madam President.
Good morning.
Madam President, I hereby present for the information of Senate the Criminal Code Prohibited Weapons Amendment Order 2025 as made by the Governor in exercise of the power conferred by Section 315A of the Criminal Code Act 1907. Senators may access copies on their tablets and/or the Parliament website.
Thank you, Minister Wilkinson. The next announcement is in the name of Senator the Honorable Crystal Caesar, Minister of Education.
Good
Senator
morning.
Caesar.
Thank
Good
you,
morning.
Madam President. Madam President, I hereby present for the information of Senate the Bermuda College Annual Report 2024 and 25. And Madam President, I have the next announcement. So at the same time, if you don't mind, I will also present for information of the Senate the Bermuda College audited financial statements for the year ended March 31st, 2025. Senators may access copies on their tablets and/or the Parliament website.
Thank you, Minister Caesar. The next announcement is in the name of Senator Lauren F. Bell, the Junior Minister of Economy and Labor. Senator Bell, you have the floor.
Yes, good morning, Madam President, colleagues, and listening audience. I hereby present for the information of Senate the November 2024 Labor Force Survey Report. Senators may access copies on their tablets and/or the Parliament website.
Thank you, Senator Bell. Item number 6 on our order paper, notices of motion. We do have a notice of motion, and that is in the name of Senator Lauren F. Bell, Junior Minister of Economy and Labor. Senator Bell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I hereby present for the consideration of Senate the Statistics Census of Population and Housing Order 2025 proposed to be made by the Minister responsible for statistics in exercise of the power conferred by Section 5.3 of the Statistics Act 2002. And I give notice that at a later point in the meeting, I will move that the said draft regulations be approved.
Thank you, Senator Bell. Moving on, item number 7, petitions. There are none. Item number 8, statements. We have two statements this morning. One is in the name of Senator the Honorable Kim R. Wilkinson, the Attorney General and Minister of Justice. Senator, Minister Wilkinson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President and members of the listening public, this ministerial statement is entitled Joint Ministerial Council 2025. Madam President, I rise today to report to this Honorable House on my recent participation in the Joint Ministerial Council, referred to as the JMC, in London at the end of November, where I had the privilege of forming part of the delegation in engagement central to Bermuda's constitutional development, legal responsibilities, and our evolving relationship with the United Kingdom. The JMC remains the highest political forum between the UK government and the governments of the overseas territories. And this year's discussions were particularly focused on strengthening democratic governance and defining the next chapter of the UK-OT partnership. Our work was ably supported by the Bermuda London office team. Madam President, leaders across the overseas territories collectively acknowledge that the framework established under the 2012 White Paper, the Overseas Territories, Security, Success, and Sustainability, no longer reflects the global, political, or democratic realities of today. A central outcome of this year's JMC was the agreement that the UK will work with each territory to develop bespoke compacts, arrangements tailored to the constitutional structure, governance needs, and democratic aspirations of each jurisdiction. As the government's principal legal advisor, I supported the Premier in discussions with the UK Minister for Overseas Territories, Stephen Doughty, on Bermuda's approach to this process. The compact will articulate the respective responsibilities of the UK, the elected government of Bermuda, and the governor, all within the parameters of the Bermuda Constitution Order. This will ultimately take the form of a memorandum of understanding, and once concluded, will be brought before this honorable House. Madam President, constitutional modernization remains a priority for this government, and I was pleased to brief the House of Lords Constitution Committee, led by Lord Strathclyde, on the considerable work undertaken to prepare the forthcoming report on Bermuda's constitutional reform pathway following Cabinet's recent approval. The UK reaffirmed its commitment to work constructively with territories whose democratic will supports constitutional revision. Bermuda remains firm in its intention to engage fully, transparently, and responsibly in this process. Madam President, a key element of my engagement at the JMC related to Bermuda's continued leadership in global financial integrity. I reiterated Bermuda's strong commitment to ensuring responsible transparency. Bermuda has introduced the Beneficial Ownership Act 1925, consolidating all relevant provisions into one modern legislative framework aligned with updated Financial Action Task Force, FATF, recommendations. Madam President, during our time in London, I also participated in several engagements related to democratic governance, constitutional law, and the evolving role of small jurisdictions in a rapidly shifting global environment. I had the privilege of speaking on a panel discussion on modern democracies alongside the premiers of the Turks and Caicos Islands and Anguilla. During that discussion, we examined how overseas territories can modernize democratic institutions while preserving constitutional stability and responding to rising public expectations for transparency, accountability, and inclusion. The week ended with a constitutional roundtable hosted by Blackstone Chambers. This session brought together legal experts to explore challenges related to judicial independence, digital governance, and the regulatory environment affecting British territories and the British Crown dependencies. Madam President, the JMC reinforced the collective determination of the overseas territories to safeguard our democratic institutions, strengthen our governance frameworks, and advance constitutional clarity. Our engagements demonstrated that more unites us than divides us. I am convinced that the shared issues we confront are best addressed through cooperation and mutual support. I'm pleased to advise that work has already commenced to turn the commitments made at the JMC into tangible outcomes that will benefit the people of Bermuda. Thank you, Madam President.
And thank you, Minister Wilkerson, AG. The second statement is in the name of the Honorable Crystal Caesar, the Minister of Education. Minister, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, today I rise to give to table and speak about the Bermuda College Annual Report for the 2024-25 and the audited financial statements for the fiscal year ended March 31st, 2025, in accordance with Section 8.2 of the Bermuda College Act 1974. Under the Bermuda College Act 1974, one of the principal functions of the Board of Governors is to prepare the annual report and audited financial statements. The annual report for 24-25 outlines the college's achievements, progress, and priorities over the reporting period, while the audited financial statements provide an independent account of the college's financial position and results for the year. Madam Speaker, the 2024-25 academic year marked a significant milestone as Bermuda College celebrated its 50th anniversary, a year characterized by purpose, transition, stabilization, and bold transformation. The year also saw the continuation of new leadership following a presidential search launched in December 2022 after the retirement of the former president. David Sam assumed office in August 2024 and recently completed his first full year as president of the Bermuda College. Under Dr. Sam's leadership, the college has renewed its emphasis on innovation, access, and institutional excellence, guided by the newly developed 2025-2030 strategic plan. The strategic plan was developed collaboratively with faculty, staff, students, alumni, and external stakeholders. It positions Bermuda College to become more accessible, globally connected, technologically modernized, and responsive to the evolving needs of the labor market. With strengthened leadership, the college has focused on community partnerships, process modernization, and investment in institutional capacity to support long-term growth. Madam Speaker, the college recorded an enrollment of 565 students in 2024-2025, an increase from the previous year. This included 297 full-time and 268 part-time students. In 2024, the college conferred 90 graduate awards. During the reporting period, student satisfaction remained high. 88% expressed overall satisfaction with their academic program, 89% endorsed the quality of instruction, and 77% were satisfied with their overall experience. Additionally, 38% of graduates indicated their intention to pursue further studies overseas, with the United Kingdom being the most popular destination. In terms of student financial support, more than $579,000 was distributed across 510 awards, benefiting 309 students, including 40 identified as financially vulnerable. This critical support was made possible through valued partnerships with the Ministry of Education, my ministry, the Bermuda College Foundation, and generous private donors. The college is also exploring opportunities to expand the tuition-free College Promise program to include graduates from all schools, GED recipients, and individuals pursuing workforce pathways. Madam President, the Division of Nursing and Allied Health continued to play a vital role in strengthening Bermuda's healthcare workforce, which I think you would like to hear, Madam President.
Absolutely.
With the support of the Bermuda College Foundation, the division acquired advanced, high fidelity simulators from Later Medical. Nursing students also gained valuable hands-on experience through health screenings with the Department of Health, a glaucoma screening at the Leahy Diabetes Health Fair, and the coordination of pediatric health fair sponsored by the Mid-Atlantic Wellness Institute. The college expanded its academic pathways and career opportunities, including a new agreement with Kentucky State University that enables Bermuda College nursing graduates to transfer directly to their third year of that institution's Bachelor of Science nursing program. The signing of its 40th Overseas Articulation Agreement with Keene University that has established a 2+2 pathways in STEM and access to graduate programs in educational leadership and policy. The Athora Division for PACE, serving more than 700 learners with strong demand for new programs in artificial intelligence and healthcare. Over 80 participants completed the new AI program. And finally, in that particular area, an articulation agreement strengthened internship pipelines with partners such as the Technology Leadership Forum, One Communications, and the Economic Development Department. Madam Speaker, the college made significant investments in campus life and digital infrastructure. Student spaces on both floors of Hallett Hall were redesigned to provide modern social and study environments. The library launched the Idea Lab, a dedicated makerspace for students, which contributed to a 114% increase in information and digital literacy instruction. Technological enhancements, including updates to the Anthology software system, financial systems, cybersecurity infrastructure, system monitoring, and website, have improved reliability, stability, and user experience across the institution. Madam Speaker, I now turn to the audited financial statements of the Bermuda College for the fiscal year ending the 31st of March, 2025. The 2024-25 audited statements were unqualified. Therefore, in the opinion of the Auditor General, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the Bermuda College and its financial operations in accordance with recognized public sector accounting standards for government and not-for-profit organizations applied in Bermuda and in Canada. The 2025 financial statements report total assets of $21,852,329, total liabilities of $18,453,043, and no long-term debt. Cash and cash equivalents decreased by 15% to $2,319,643, primarily due to capital investments and reductions in amounts due to creditors and accrued expenses. Revenues and expenses for the period show the following. Revenue from student fees decreased by 1.32% to $2,542,094. $2,542,094. The government grant increased slightly by 0.13% to $628,329. Total revenue increased by 0.22% to $20,089,574. Total expenses increased by 5.72% to $21,674,830. And the college recorded a net deficit of $1.585 million $256. Madam President, I'm pleased to report that through collaboration, through the collaborative efforts of Bermuda College and the Office of the Auditor General, the college remains fully current with its annual audits. Madam President, the college continues to demonstrate resilience, innovation, and a deep commitment to serving the people of Bermuda. With strengthened leadership, expanded academic pathways, modernized infrastructure, and robust community partnerships, the college is well positioned to advance its mission of transforming lives and strengthening our workforce. I commend the Board of Governors, the President, Dr. Sam, faculty, staff, students, and all partners whose dedication continues to elevate Bermuda's only tertiary institution. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Minister Crystal Caesar, Minister of Education. Moving on with our orders of the day, our agenda. Item number 9, introduction of bills. There are none. Item number 10, the first reading of public bills. Senators, the following public bills have been received from the Honorable House of Assembly and are hereby read for the first time. Their titles are, respectively, the Corporate Income Tax Amendment Number 2 Act 2025 and the Tax Credit Act 2025. And Senators, these bills will be taken up on our orders of the day. Item number 11, the first reading of private bills. There are none. Item number 12, question period. Senators, we will now entertain questions on the statements that were given this morning. The first being in the name of Honorable Minister of Justice and Attorney General, the Honorable Kim Wilkerson. Would any senator care to ask any questions on this statement? Senator Cunningham, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for that statement, Madam AG. I just have let's see how it goes. But I just have one main question about what the government of Bermuda's negotiating power is with the UK for this compact, and I guess how we're expected to adopt any anything that comes under the MOU that you mentioned. Is it completely collaborative? Thank you.
So, Minister Wilkins, yes, you can respond to her question this time.
Thank you, Madam President. I was waiting to see if there were any other questions, but there may be.
Would you like
I'll-
to have other
No,
questions?
no, that's fine. I'm
You
happy
deal
to
with
answer
her
this
first,
question.
okay.
And the simple answer is yes. The question was, what is the kind of negotiating, I think, stance of the government in relation to this? And I think ours is the same as all of the overseas territories. We are still overseas territories. We are colonies. So there is that in the structure of leverage, but at the same time, we understand that it will be a collaborative process, and as I said, and the governor will be at the table as part of that process as well.
Sorry, Senator Cunningham, you have a.
And a second question, you mentioned tangible outcomes that will benefit Bermuda. I was just wondering in what capacity would we see some of those, outcomes? Could you list some?
Thank you. So examples would be there was a presentation during the JMC from the UK export finance team. They did a visit to Bermuda just before the JMC. This is, in other words, it's an export credit facility, and Bermuda has the opportunity to gain financing on very favorable terms for major capital projects. This is something that is available to all of the territories, but they are ranked in terms of their creditability, and therefore Bermuda, and this is public information, is able to access up to $1 billion. Other smaller territories or those with a less strong financial position have lower amounts. So there was an opportunity to, and part of the process with accessing this type of financing, obviously we finance all kinds of things. Are they on terms that are best? So this is an opportunity to take projects, to think about long-term planning. We have the ability to engage resources, planning resources as well. So these are the kinds of things that we're looking at already. In addition, coming out of the conference, there will be an Attorney General's conference hosted by the BVI next year. We will have a seat at that table as well. We had talked about really tangible collaboration around our processes toward the compacts. Those are things that clearly we say, Bermuda is on a different footing in some regards. Constitutionally, our degree of self-governance is far more extensive than territories to the south and even for the Crown dependencies. But we recognize there are so many more things that we have in common. And so coming out of the JMC would be opportunities to talk about the things that are in common. For example, even a small territory that has 4,000 people like St. Helena, or Anguilla with 15,000 people, Bermuda with 60,000 people, we have the same challenges around our young people will leave our jurisdiction and they may not come back. How do we attract people back? How do we continue to build our economies in terms of people, right? And recognizing that ways to attract our own people to come back to our shores is important. Examinations about why people might leave. And it was very interesting to discover that we may be bigger, we may be in a different climate, but we're faced with the same issues. So coming out of it, the opportunities to clearly collaborate, people wanting to understand how we've done some of the things that we have done, and how we might be able to share those.
Thank you. And before Senator Tannock does have some questions, but I would just like to acknowledge in the chamber, Genesis Iris from the AG's chambers and Michelle Hayek from the Corporate Income Tax Agencies. Welcome to you both. Senator Tannock, you have questions for this on this statement?
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, AG. My first question is just one of clarification, and that would be when the AG mentioned the roadmap to constitutional reform, are we speaking about the roadmap that was established in 2022, or has there been any amendments or updates to that?
Madam AG.
Thank you, Senator Tannock. There is a new roadmap, and not so much a roadmap, but there is a form of how we're going to go about it. So the process for how we're going to go about engagement on the process to constitutional reform has been put before cabinet, and it is something that has been created in collaboration, certainly with the UK. There have been engagements with other territories, because in some regards, Turks and Caicos, for example, doesn't have the degree of self-governance that Bermuda has, but their constitution is more modern in other ways. And so it's looking at those. So the process hasn't been brought here yet. It is a draft, but there's a draft way forward, and it really relates to how we stage the processes for informing what goes in and how we establish our priorities for constitutional reform. So that will be a very public-facing process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Tannock, you have a second question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that explanation. So the first roadmap was based on Dr. Corbin, who I believe was an expert from the United Nations, his paper on self-governance indicators. And it seems like there's been a shift from that, let's just say, more independent informed roadmap to one that's now in collaboration with the UK. And I'm reminded of the Audre Lorde quote, "You can't burn down the master's house with the master's tools." So I wonder if what is the premise behind shifting from a more independent evaluation of self-governance indicators to one in alliance with the UK?
Madam AG.
Very interesting. I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Corbin when I was at the UN in October on, the paper on decolonization. The process is laying out a way forward, because you cannot, I should say, burn down the master's house with the master's tools. But if the master is holding all of the tools, right, your best chance of success is getting engagement about the way to get to the result that we want. And what we found out was that the UK is very much willing to engage, because the UK recognizes that if whatever it is that the territories wish to do in terms of constitutional reform, that should be in their hands to do, but there is a way to do it. And part of the process building is to ensure that the methodology that we use is defensible. And when I say defensible, that there isn't a way that at the end of the day, a party can stand up and say, well, we could judicially review this, the government's handling of this process because it didn't follow. And I ought to say that the work it builds on all of the work that was previously done. It's not new work, but at this point, people should understand it's not decision making, it's just the how part.
Senator Wilk. Sorry.
Thank you for the
Senator
explanation.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes complete and fundamental sense in terms of framework and having a framework that is sustainable. Thank you for that explanation. And so my last question is really a comment that I want to phrase as a question to make sure that it's noted. But Madam AG, as you will know, one of my passions ever since I was chairperson of the Human Rights Commission has been to enshrine gender as a protected category in our Constitution. And I hope that any changes to the Constitution that we consider protect women, protect men, protect anybody based on gender from discrimination, because as you would be aware now, gender is not a protected category. And should we fall into a malicious government that wishes to restrict the rights of persons based on gender, we would only have the Human Rights Act as our protection. And we've seen that the Human Rights Act itself has been amended to reflect policies that advance government decision making. So I would urge that one of our first steps in constitutional reform is to have the protection of gender to protect us in our Constitution.
Mr. Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Senator Tannock. And it's as you say, it's a comment dressed as a question. But I will say thank you for that. And there will be opportunities to hear from every stakeholder, certainly including human rights. And I appreciate the comment that you have made, because sometimes when the issue of constitutional reform has been raised, there is an assumption that it's about independence, and it is not about independence. That may be one thing. So there, I think Senator Tannock's point illustrates that there are so many other areas where a constitution must be modernized. We are with a 1968 constitutional order, and we recognize that it is not purpose-built for the world that we live in. If we look around this room, led by a female Madam President of the Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Wilkinson. With that, we'll move on now to the second statement that was given by the Honorable Crystal Caesar, the Bermuda College's annual report and audited financial statements. Would any senator care to ask questions on this statement? Senator Cunningham, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President. And as people will be aware, I would declare my interest as an adjunct lecturer at Bermuda College, but I have a very hold Bermuda College very near and dear to me, and congratulations on their 50th and all the work that Dr. Sam has done with the strategic plan. I think my first question is related around the College Promise program, and you mentioned expanding it to other high school grads and workforce pathway students. I was just wondering, and I think that's great, and I think there are a lot of students who come out of the private schools or other home schools that may not be ready to go overseas if they're wanting to pursue further education. But has there been, so my first question, has there been a cost analysis for expanding that College Promise program? And as a follow-up to that, has there been consideration to lowering, at the moment it's a 3.0 GPA coming out of the public schools on the year they graduated, would there be consideration to lowering that GPA requirement from the 3.0, say, to a 2.75? And I don't know how many more students that would encompass, but it'd be interesting to know how many students we aren't catching or capturing because they fall below that 3.0 and they can't afford the tuition fees.
Okay, so thank you for that, Madam President. Thank you for the question from my colleague. And so as opposed to answering that question, I'm actually going to take it as advice as to how we should proceed in terms of consideration for expanding it, because we are still in the process of determining how we want to expand it. So I will actually take that as advice as to how we should consider additional students for expanding for the College Promise. And again, thank you for declaring your interest. I wasn't aware of that. So you obviously would have some inside information as to some of the considerations that we should make as it pertains to expanding that. So I will take that on board when we have that consideration or move forward with that. Okay.
Thank you, Minister
Thank
Caesar.
you.
Would any, yes, Senator Cunningham, you have a second
you.
question?
Yes, second question. So I'm obviously involved in the insurance education and very excited that there's consideration for an associate in insurance coming from September. I think Dr. Sam is very strategic in his thinking of, we are a financial services domicile. We should be, having that. He goes on about Vegas. You'd have a hospitality school and anything to do with gambling and gaming. But I think my question would be, how is Bermuda College aligning its programs with workforce needs in the future? So I note that, nursing is on the agenda, but, we've got the students coming through Cedar Bridge with the STEM programs. Are we actually strategically looking at aligning those programs that we're putting out with the needs of the workforce of the future?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. And exactly, we are doing that. I did actually meet with Dr. Sam and members of the Board of Governors to consider how we are planning going forward, ensuring that there is a vertical path for people who would like to take up different subject areas at the Bermuda College, aligning it with what obviously high schools are doing. And so some of those conversations have begun in hospitality, in some of the education services, etc. So yes, we are having those conversations such that young people who are taking certain signatures it can be aligned at Bermuda College for those who believe that, I'm not ready to go overseas, or this may give them additional education such that they can go overseas if necessary, because sometimes it may just lead to a path where they finished get an accreditation at high school, but then they can get a further one at Bermuda College and then enter the workforce. Yeah, so we are doing exactly that. Yes.
Thank you, Minister Caesar.
And then my third question is relating to the articulation agreements. So as people may be aware, we mentioned we just got to 40. I believe there's another one on the table, but this is where overseas institutions will recognize the Bermuda College. And so it's the 2+2. So 2 years at Bermuda College, and then you go on for 2 years. My organization currently very proud of our students that actually came out of dual enrollment. So they graduated with their associates and now they're going overseas for 2 years at St. John's. But you mentioned that the UK is the most popular destination for students leaving Bermuda College, but I am fairly certain that most of the articulation agreements are within the US and Canada. So I know that the education system is very different in the UK, but is any consideration being made to expanding those with UK universities?
Very simple answer. Yes, we are. Especially since it's a destination, Madam President, if I may, that seems to be most popular with students. We would need to obviously have those conversations such that, again, we're making it easier for students to be able to transfer to their destination of choice.
Thank you, Minister.
And then a supplemental to that with regards to specific subjects. So obviously hospitality being a big one that we're going to need in the next, 1 to 5 years. How about not necessarily articulation agreements, but agreements with universities or colleges overseas? I know there's a big hospitality school in Switzerland where, maybe our students can get 6 months to a year experience overseas and maybe not come out with an undergrad, but it be applied to their associate's degree.
Minister Caesar?
So yes, again, the articulation agreements, there is some additional discussion that needs to be had to ensure that we are aligning our curricula such that students will be able to transfer. And I am actually familiar and have had conversation most recently about the school in Switzerland of which you speak. And we need to ensure that the curricula align such that children will be able to advance further on in, again, whichever jurisdiction, and the expansion of offerings that the Bermuda College provides.
Thank you, Minister Caesar.
And then a supplemental to that.
Question.
So I'm aware that in certain parts of business industry, Bermuda, there is a stigma around Bermuda College students, and I want to completely dispel that. Our students at Bermuda College are unbelievable. Some of them might just have that financial barrier of going overseas. Some of them might have the GPA restriction that's then going to restrict them on scholarships. But what efforts would Bermuda College be making to ensure that industry partners believe in the value of the associates of these students coming out, so they don't then have to go overseas, so that we can actually take, at face value, the associates of whatever subject it is, that they can then come in and join the workforce on the same level as anybody else?
And thank you for that. I appreciate the support of Bermuda College, and being a professor there, you might recall or might be aware that there is a accreditation exercise coming up in February. And so what I want the listening public and all to understand is that Bermuda College is doing its level best to ensure that we are providing quality education for students. And as the Minister of Education, I think people think that I'm the Minister of Primary and High School, but it does include the Bermuda College as well. And so when I speak about high quality teaching and learning, that extends to Bermuda College. And through the different accreditations that the Bermuda College has, which I'm more than positive they will be able to obtain, there should be a level of comfort given as to the quality of education that one can, a student can get at Bermuda College. But I also encourage community partners to visit Bermuda College, and if there are industries or interests, support Bermuda College as well, such that if there is a particular area where they do not see a course or maybe programs or support that's required, that's why it needs to be, it's a community college, right? So we're encouraging our community partners to have the conversations, to approach. Dr. Sam and his team are very open to those types of collaborations, and that's why I've been very impressed with, as I spoke in my statement about Hallett Hall, which has been refurbished, and that was a community partnership. So clearly, there are community and corporate partners that believe in Bermuda College, and so we encourage others to get on the bandwagon. Quite frankly.
Thank you, Mrs.
Yes,
Caesar.
thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator Cunningham. Before we leave, can I ask if there's any other questions? Minister Wilkerson, you have a comment.
Thank you, Madam President. I do. I just in the exchange, and certainly with Senator Cunningham's questions, I'm thrilled that she is giving her time to the Bermuda College. and in the question around, what is being done to encourage industry to recognize Bermuda College students, you would be aware that there was a recent campaign around highlighting Bermuda College graduates. And so, I mean, in that regard, I want to take this forum to say, oh, great. No, the one for IB actually around, yes. And there's been a trades one as well. But taking the opportunity to say that I'm a proud graduate of the Bermuda College. And, I went in the ancient days, one might say, sorry, but, but I was in the first group of, early group of graduates to go off to New York. My degree is from St. John's, kind of return to the industry at the beginning of things in the 80s. But I think it is important for industry knows that the Bermuda College can produce such people, and for young people to know that this is a path that you can take, and that going to the college is valuable, that it is not second best, that it will be the proper step to getting to your future. And so I was really, really pleased to be there for the Founders Wall, and to see how it is, how it's progressing, even and how it continues to be valuable and relevant to the jurisdiction. So thank you for your fine work. Thank you for your fine work.
Thank you, Madam AG, for your comments. And with that said, I think there are no further comments or questions on this statement. And I thank you all for your questions, and Minister for your responses. Moving on with our agenda, orders of the day, we now come to the orders of the day. And the first order of the day is the second reading of the Corporate Income Tax Amendment Number 2 Act 2025. And that's in the name of Senator the Honorable Crystal Caesar, spokesperson for Finance. Mr. Caesar, when you're ready, you can present your.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the provisions of Standing Order 25 be granted so that the Senate may now proceed with the second reading of the bill entitled the Corporate Income Tax Amendment Number 2 Act 2025.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, it is my distinct honor and privilege on behalf of the government to rise this morning in this honorable House to debate the bill entitled the Corporate Income Tax Amendment. The Corporate Income Tax Amendment Number 2 Act 2025. Madam President, this bill proposes amendments to the Corporate Income Tax Act 2023, or the CIT Act, to clarify certain provisions, resolve interpretive issues that have risen, and enhance the overall alignment of the legislation with international standards and administrative best practices. Madam President, by way of background, I would note that the Corporate Income Tax Act 2023 was enacted in December 2023, implementing a 15% corporate income tax in a manner designed to be consistent with the OECD's Pillar 2 Global Minimum Tax Model rules, and to incorporate substantive concepts from those rules and related guidance. The OECD releases administrative guidance as part of a continuous program in addressing matters that have emerged amongst OECD inclusive framework members, which require clarification or amplification to the commentary to the Pillar 2 model rules. When the OECD releases administrative guidance, any changes are reviewed to determine whether amendments to Bermuda's legislation are required. A first set of amendments to the Corporate Income Tax Act 2023, which focused on penalty provisions, was included in an earlier amendment act, which was passed in April 2025, and further administrative regulations became operative in June 2025. This proposed Second Amendment Act is a result of further changes that are required to the Corporate Income Tax Act 2023 to reflect the OECD's Pillar 2 Global Minimum Tax Model rules, including related guidance. Madam President, the Corporate Income Tax Agency held a public consultation on the proposed amendments to the Act in September 2025, which included an illustrative bill. The feedback received during the consultation process has been thoroughly reviewed and thoughtfully considered. Where appropriate, revisions have been incorporated into the legislation to address the concerns and suggestions raised by stakeholders. This approach ensures that the legislation is both practical in its application and reflective of the input from those it will affect. Madam President, the proposed amendments relate to the following matters and were put forward for discussion: shock losses, foreign tax credits, excluded entities, allocation of adjusted creditable foreign taxes, fiscal year mismatches, adjustments to financial accounting net income or loss, including pension expense adjustments and a reciprocal shipping exemption, disregard of taxable temporary differences, translation of non-USD denominated tax balances, hedging provisions, additional definitions, and other minor corrections. Madam President, in addition to the substantive amendments previously outlined, there is a consequential amendment to the Corporate Income Tax Agency Act for the agency to be granted additional responsibilities for calculating and administering the application, award, and refund of any tax credits, including under and in connection with the proposed Tax Credits Act 2025, and such other functions or duties as may be conferred on or delegated to the agency. Madam President, in closing, I wish to emphasize that the government remains confident that the corporate income tax framework reinforces Bermuda's steadfast commitment to global compliance and transparency while preserving the island's strong and respected international standing. The progress made to date has been greatly supported by the invaluable contributions of the International Tax Working Group, whose continued expertise and dedication remained central to this important initiative. I would like to sincerely thank everyone in the Ministry of Finance and CITA, along with our dedicated advisors, for the time, effort, and expertise they have contributed to this work. I also extend my appreciation to the drafting team at the Attorney General's Chambers for their valuable support throughout this process. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Crystal Caesar, spokesperson for finance. And just to, I know I introduced them earlier on, but I'm sure this particular bill is very relevant for our visitors here, Ms. Michelle Hayek and
Genesis Iris.
Genesis from the Genesis Iris from the AG's Chambers. Again, welcome to you both. Would any senator care to speak on this bill? Senator Tannock, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Minister Caesar. So my question is not so much the substance of this amendment, but what I find glaringly absent from this amendment. As I raised in the Senate many months ago, we have an issue in which entities who are not an entity for which they are responsible for corporate income tax are now in a jurisdiction in which issues TINs and they do not have a TIN. And as I mentioned previously, when we make filings, if you are part of those entities, you normally indicate that the country in which you or the system in which you operate do not issue TINs, and therefore you do not have one. That is no longer the case because we do now issue TINs, and there has still been a noticeable silence around the treatment of TINs for non-qualifying entities for tax-paying reasons. So my question is, when can we expect that to be addressed? That's the first one. And the second one was there is a noticeable lack of silence around the way that segregated account companies are treated. Right now, and this really actually goes back to the TIN issue, because right now you can have one company with 12 segregated account sales, but only one TIN is issued, but only perhaps 2 of those sales are actually eligible to pay tax. However, there's only one TIN. So my question to the minister is, when will we get the areas that affect all these subsequent issues that arise? When will we get these addressed? And as I mentioned, I did raise this TIN issue months ago. I may have even raised the segregated accounts issue months ago. I will also say that I've contacted the tax reform, or I guess Corporate Income Tax Commission CEO and compliance lead. I can't remember her name, but the lady from, I believe, Barbados, about this issue as well. And the silence has been deafening.
Minister.
Madam President, I do recall our fellow senator raising this issue previously, but at this particular time, those issues are not addressed in this act. And so I would ask if she would just give me a few minutes to confer with the technical team to answer those specific questions.
By all means.
Sorry, and I had two questions. So to clarify, I actually, the TIN question that I raised directly to the Income Tax Commission heads was with regard to clarification and guidance being issued around the treatment of segregated account sales with TIN. So it's all wrapped up in the TIN issue, which I just haven't seen considered anywhere. And also for members of the listening public, TIN is tax identification number. So a tax identification number in jurisdictions that collect corporate income tax normally issues a tax identification number to each business. And so what happens is if you are in Bermuda and you did not pay corporate income tax, you would normally note that you did not have one due to Bermuda not having corporate income tax. So that was just a matter of clarity for the listening audience.
Thank you, Senator Tennant.
Thank you, Senator Tennick. I do appreciate that because when I wrote it down, I actually in my notes said that we need to define what TIN is because the listening audience may or may not know what that is. But again, thank you for bringing this back to to be highlighted. But as it pertains, this particular amendment does not address that. And so I do not actually have a specific answer to that TIN question. However, it is under consideration and additional guidance it is being considered as it stands right now. And so what I very simply can say is stay tuned. It's not for a lack of consideration. It's just that this particular amendment does not address that particular issue at this time.
Thank you, Minister. Would any other senator care to ask a question on this bill? Senator Cunningham, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I think on the whole, the opposition is in agreement, and I would just like to thank the ministry for offering up the tax discussion and presentation that we had last week. This bill is obviously extremely technical, so it was well received. As we obviously prepare for full implementation, it is obvious that we are obviously at the mercy of the OECD and all their administrative guidelines. So we understand, the necessary amendments to legislation. My question would be, I mean, everyone wants to have a future ball, but how much additional amendments are we likely to be looking at in the future? And how business thrives on certainty, and it's just kind of we're putting these in, and I understand that this is now paving the way for the tax credits, which will come up next, but businesses want that certainty with this jurisdiction. So what can we anticipate potentially in the future? Thank you.
Minister.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. And thank you, colleague. How long is a piece of string? I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be flippant, but as you would note in my statement, I did talk about we've had consultation and collaboration with industry, and so as issues are discussed, there may or may not be amendments that need to be made. And so I believe that with some of the discussions that were had most recently, those amendments have now come to the floor. We have another which our fellow colleague has highlighted in terms of guidance, et cetera. And so should that be required, that amendment will come as well. I believe that there has been quite a bit of consultation with industry such that they are comfortable with some of the amendments that are coming and happy with them as well. So I really can't say, unless, of course, there is an issue that industry comes up with, or the team finds that we need to bring additional amendments for. But when required, they will come for discussion.
Thank you. Senator Cunningham, you have a second.
Just based on
question?
that, so then are we confident that we're now addressing any OECD kind of concerns or whatever to this point? So we're in alignment.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister, for that response. Madam AG.
Thank you, Madam President. I think it's appropriate to say that Bermuda doesn't have the opportunity to control when the OECD decides to make another determination. We wish that we could, right? But what we can say is that there clearly is, as always, a collaborative process with industry, the opportunities to see what is coming down the pipe, the opportunities to engage for, I set prior to this role, certainly on the ABEARS Policy Committee, where we have an opportunity to look at these illustrative drafts, to collaborate with the government, to say how they impact industry, and so on. So that's the normal process of engagement. So I don't think that industry is surprised by additional changes. Now, to be fair, some changes are technical things that maybe, we're the drafting team, which obviously is in my ministry, we're drafting fast and furiously, and sometimes there isn't always perfection, and we go back and we fix small things that need to be fixed. But mainly driving these changes are additional considerations from the OECD that we must comply with. So we would love to be able to say that it's done and dusted, but as my colleague says, it's not in our gift to confirm that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam AG, Minister of Justice, Mr. Wilkinson, for the explanation. With that said, now you can
Yes.
move your bill.
Yes, and thank you, Madam President. I'd like to say thank you to colleagues for their support in this. It's important for our jurisdiction, and I think that we've done great work to date to make sure that we are in compliance. And so again, thank you for the support. So with that, Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Corporate Income Tax Amendment Number 2 Act 2025 be now read a second time.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the bill, that Rule 26 be suspended in respect of this bill.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Corporate Income Tax Amendment Act Number 2 Act 2025 be now read a third time.
Is there any objection to the third reading? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the bill do now pass.
It has been moved that the bill entitled the Corporate Income Tax Amendment Number 2 Act 2025 do not pass. Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The bill is passed. Thank you, Mr. Caesar, and to all senators who participated. We'll now move on to the next item on our order paper, and that is the second reading of the Tax Credit Act 2025, and that's also in the name of Senator the Honorable Crystal Caesar, spokesperson for finance.
Thank you once again, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the provisions of Standing Order 25 be granted so that the Senate may now proceed with the second reading of the bill entitled the Corporate Income Tax. Oops, I'm sorry.
Tax credit. Tax credit. Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. The Tax Credit Act 2025. I'm sorry, I have too many pieces of paper in front of me. And I'll just repeat to be clear. Madam President, I move that the provisions of Standing Order 25 be granted so that the Senate may now proceed with the second reading of the bill entitled the Tax Credit Act 2025.
Thank you, Mr. Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you. Madam President, it is my honor and privilege on behalf of the government to discuss in this honorable House and debate the bill entitled the Tax Credit Act 2025.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. Carry
Madam
on.
President, this bill proposes to incentivize industries that are instrumental to the growth and development of the Bermuda economy to invest in their on-island operations, to encourage such investment when it results in increased employment in Bermuda and greater job opportunities for Bermudians, to further encourage such investment when it leads to increased expenditure on domestic goods and services, thereby benefiting the wider local economy, to provide utility credits that help reduce operating costs for qualifying businesses, and finally, to recognize and encourage charitable contributions where such contributions represent a meaningful benefit to the community. By way of background, Madam President, I would note that it has now been about 2 years since the Corporate Income Tax Act 2023 was enacted in December 2023. And it came into effect. That act imposes a statutory rate of 15% on the profits of Bermuda entities that are part of multinational enterprise groups, with total global revenues exceeding 750 million euros in at least 2 of the preceding 4 fiscal years. Since its enactment, the Corporate Income Tax Agency has become fully operational. With this progress, the government has moved to begin advancing the remaining aspects of the tax framework. Madam President, the Tax Reform Commission, established in November 2023, was tasked with incorporating potential revenues from the CIT and making policy recommendations to support a revised tax system for Bermuda. This system aimed to maintain Bermuda's competitiveness through qualified refundable tax credits and other incentives, guided by key principles. Those principles being generating sufficient and predictable government revenue to meet commitments, supporting Bermuda's ability to attract investment and residents while aligning with international standards, ensuring fairness and equity by balancing tax burdens according to ability to pay, and maintaining simplicity for efficient administration and ease of compliance. Qualifying refundable tax credits, QRTCs, which I will use going forward because that is a tongue twister. So QRTCs are refundable tax credits that are paid in cash within a specified period, generally up to 4 years, when they are not applied against tax and are intended to support investment. Madam President, the TRC, or the Tax Reform Commission, submitted its report in August 2025, outlining its principal recommendations. The TRC has proposed the introduction of substance-based tax credit for insurers beginning in 2025, as well as the development of community and utility infrastructure credits. In addition, housing, infrastructure, and innovation tax credits are recommended for implementation in 2026 or 2027, reflecting their greater complexity. These additional credits targeted for implementation in 2026 or 2027 will support the development of critical national infrastructure while ensuring that Bermuda's fiscal regime remains transparent, equitable, and in line with international standards. Madam President, a substance-based tax credit reduces a corporation's income tax liability based on its real economic activity in the jurisdiction. The credit is typically calculated from local payroll and tangible assets, recognizing genuine operational substance rather than profit sharing. It encourages companies to maintain and grow the amount of employees, facilities, and investment within the jurisdiction. A utility infrastructure tax credit lowers a corporation's income tax liability for certain utility-related costs or investment, such as energy-efficient equipment, renewable energy use, or improvements to utility infrastructure. These credits incentivize efficient utility consumption and support energy or environmental policy goals. This credit is available to utility companies within the purview of the regulatory authority, but is not, unlike the substance-based credit, refundable if there is insufficient corporate income tax to offset. A community or charitable giving tax credit directly reduces a corporation's income tax liability when it makes qualifying contributions to charitable organizations. The credit encourages businesses to support local development, social programs, and charitable initiatives that provide public benefits. Madam President, the Ministry of Finance conducted a public consultation on this legislation in late August, following the submission of the TRC report. During this process, they received valuable feedback from industry stakeholders and other interested parties. That input was carefully reviewed, and the draft legislation was amended where necessary to ensure that the framework is clear, effective, and responsive to the practical considerations raised during the consultation. Madam President, as we move toward implementing this legislation, the government remains committed to ensuring strong governance and accountability in the administration of these tax credits. The framework includes clear eligibility criteria, transparent reporting requirements, and appropriate oversight to ensure that the credits are awarded fairly and deliver measurable economic benefit. Moreover, the government will continue to work collaboratively with industry stakeholders as the tax regime evolves, ensuring that Bermuda remains fully aligned with international standards while safeguarding our long-term economic stability. Madam President, the introduction of the tax credit legislation represents a significant step forward in the modernization of Bermuda's tax system. This bill is designed to strengthen Bermuda's position as a forward-looking jurisdiction by establishing a clear, transparent framework for the provision of targeted tax credits. These credits will support key sectors of the economy, encourage investment in Bermuda's infrastructure and workforce, and promote sustainable economic growth. Importantly, the legislation will ensure that fiscal incentives are delivered in a fair, equitable, and predictable manner, consistent with Bermuda's commitment to sound financial management and international best practice. By implementing this legislation, the government is taking a proactive approach to maintaining Bermuda's attractiveness as a place to do business, while ensuring that the tax framework remains modern, balanced, and responsive to the needs of the economy. I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to everyone in the Ministry of Finance and the Corporate Income Tax Agency, as well as our dedicated advisors for their time and expertise and commitment to this important work. I also thank the drafting team at the AG's chambers for their invaluable support through the process. Their collective efforts have been essential in bringing this legislation to the House and ensuring it reflects careful consideration, technical precision, and the best interests of Bermuda. Thank you, Madam President.
And thank you, Minister Crystal Caesar, the spokesperson for Finance in the Senate. Would any senator care to speak on this bill? Senator Tawana Tanek, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I have some questions myself, but I actually have a question that was forwarded to me. So I'm just going to pull that up to make sure that I asked that correctly. So should have had it ready. My apologies. Okay, yeah. So the question is, there is the noted anomaly as part of the Tax Credit Act that certain companies will benefit from this legislation because the OECD rules appear to read that if a credit targets the insurance industry, then all in the industry will benefit, regardless of certain companies' tax status, i.e., a local insurance company in Bermuda will, under the Act, receive the tax credit benefit without being subject to paying the tax. What is the government's view on this matter of an inconsistency and inequality? In theory, these companies could pass on these windfalls gains to customers to lower premiums, but this would be difficult to monitor. Is this something that the government will be trying to monitor? That's the first question. Do you want me?
Minister, Would you like to address, or you want her second question?
If she could go ahead with the next question so that we can get the
Senator Tanner,
responses.
proceed.
Yes, thank you. So then the next questions are actually my question, and it is just a matter of clarity. And I know that this was spoken to in the House and also at an information session, but for clarity, when we speak about eligible employees, I can only identify two areas when we speak about eligible employees that we specify that persons who would be in Bermuda under a work permit are exempted. So when we look through the workforce portion of the credits, can the minister outline which portions of those credits include all employees and which only include employees who are not in Bermuda on a work permit? Because I can't honestly, I can't determine that. I can't see it. Like I said, I can see clearly that Section 17 has a work permit exemption. For those who would be under a work permit, they would not be included. But I was wondering if it would be very helpful for companies if they knew when we talk about eligible employees and we look at the workforce or headcount factors, can we go through each one of those factors and say eligible employees in this case are all employees, or eligible employees in this case are employees, but not those who have work permits. I can offer more clarity on that if required. And then my last question is, and I think this just might be my misunderstanding of this legislation, because I did try to go through it again when we got it last night, but I just wanted to clarify that when we look at the calculation of a workday, am I correct that TAN 2A and TAN 3A, and I'm sorry because I actually don't have the act up in front of me, but I'm pretty sure that those sections state that if you are on maternity leave, out sick, and it was bereavement leave, and the company is paying for that leave, that's still not included and counted as a work day when a company is submitting the work days to get credit for headcount or payroll. And my question is, if my interpretation is correct, why was that decision made? Because the employer is still paying for that employee for those times of supported leave. And if I'm incorrect, then I'm incorrect. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tanner.
Thank you, Madam President. Just asking for a little patience while I confer with technical team. Thank you.
Do you want additional questions from other senators, or you're just? Senators,
yes,
the minister
we'll
has
take more.
indicated that she will entertain questions from others. So I think Senator Cunningham, I think you raised your hand to say you had questions.
Thank you, Madam President. And once again, the opposition is supportive of this bill. We recognize the importance. Well, you know, this is a major shift in Bermuda's tax regime. But I think it's important that the government shows a framework that can preserve our competitiveness as a jurisdiction and also maintain that economic requirements for the OECD. I do have a few questions. I will declare another interest. Well, actually, there's kind of two. So I work for a charity. I'm the executive director of a charity, and I also am the administrator of BermudaScholarships.com, one-stop shop for all of Bermuda's scholarships. And while on there, many are obviously government Ministry of Education and charity-based scholarships. A large number are from private insurance and reinsurance companies who are offering, I would say, at a guess, in excess of $1 million a year in funding. A few of them are full ride scholarships for up to 4 years for Bermudian students. Those would not come under the community charitable giving because it's obviously not going to a registered Bermuda charity. So has consideration been made for those things, because I would hate to see those companies, many of whom are going to be some of our larger CIT payers, I would imagine, reduce that funding. I mean, I'd love to see it being shoveled into my charity, but we will see. But I just think that's something that needs to be thought about, because there is a substantial amount of funding that is going to our Bermudian students.
So your question specifically to the minister.
So my question specifically is, has consideration been made for the scholarship funding that some of these insurance and reinsurance companies are paying to Bermudian students? You know, it's not necessarily charitable, so it doesn't come out of community, but it's something in the as it would be related to a tax credit benefit.
Question one. Did
That's
you have
the first
The
question.
minister did say she would entertain your question. So that's
And then
question
the
one.
second question is around, and I believe my colleague Senator Tannock touched on it, but is because we're obviously taking the tax credits away from the payment of the CIT, so they are being deemed as two separate items. Obviously, as has been mentioned, our local insurers, so now All Shores, CG, and Friesenbrook Meyer, will be getting the benefit of the tax credits without actually paying the tax. How will we ensure that those cost savings are passed on? And the same goes for Belco under the Utilities Act. And I get that that's to make them whole after the Pillar 2 requirements, but I just want to make sure that this is an opportunity to reduce some of the cost of living, and insurance in this island is immense. So will it bring down the likes of private health insurance, motor, house, homeowners, whatever? And then my third question is around the leakage. So I just mentioned that certain organizations, companies, insurance companies will be paying this tax, but all insurers will be open to get the tax credits. What is government doing to ensure that how can we measure the impact of any leakage that these credits are going to be from these companies that aren't actually going to pay the CIT? So how can we ensure that the credits will still deliver a net benefit to the government? Thank you.
Senator Tannock?
Madam President, do I have any questions left to ask?
You've asked 3 already. So.
Oh, can I do a
And
supplementary
supplementary?
to Senator Cunningham's question regarding leakage and the companies? And like Senator Cunningham, I must declare my interest. As many will know, I am the managing director of a marine insurance company. And I do have some entities that qualify for, that have to, I do have some entities under management that will actually potentially have to pay tax, and then some that don't. So that's that there.
Yes.
So I guess my question is, and this goes back to my other question, when we have the leakage and we have the companies, as Senator Cunningham stated, that don't pay tax but do receive the benefit, this comes back to the monitoring, and this comes back to my question about identification numbers and the system. What is the system? Because right now, if you haven't indicated that you are eligible to pay tax, like I said, you don't have a number. So for those companies who can access the credits, who don't pay tax, will they be assigned I don't know, what will they be assigned? How will this be handled? Because I thank you, Senator Cunningham, because I actually completely forgot about that. That is one thing that is not handled at all in the legislation, is these entities that may qualify, how they will be identified, if they will self-identify, and then what information will be provided for them to track. What can you address that? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tannock. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam President.
Sorry.
I
Senator Fubler.
I
You
don't
the
have
floor.
questions necessarily, but I did want to speak in support of the bill, given my
Absolutely.
responsibility for tourism, transport, culture, and sport. And so I will focus my comments kind of around the charitable giving, given my remit. And so just so we're all on the same playing field, and for the benefit of the listening audience, the charitable tax credit is 25% of eligible charitable expenses with a minimum threshold. This is something I especially wanted to highlight, because you must commit to $300,000 over a rolling 3-year period. So it is not only a significant contribution, it needs to be consistent and persistent, both things that are reasonable and relatively competitive. I wanted to look around. People are probably familiar with some of the points raised by those who are maybe not in opposition, but apprehensive of the application of income taxes, right? It is a thorny subject for some, especially in the capitalist society that we live in. But I took a look around, and the OECD tax policy studies, taxation and philanthropy, released, I think, in 2021. I might have that year wrong, but the important point is that, if I may, Madam President, they go on to say in the report that almost all OECD countries provide some form of preferential tax treatment for philanthropy. Entities with a philanthropic status typically receive tax relief directly in relation to their activities, while both individual and corporate donors to these entities are often able to receive tax incentives that lower the cost of giving. And so I welcome these provisions in the bill as they are moving us in a direction that aligns us with some of our competing jurisdictions. And another source I took a look at, the European Commission on Taxation in Support of the Social Economy, has an overview of existing forms of tax measures in EU member states. One thing that makes us more competitive is that they say tax credits are less common than tax deductions. The difference there being the credit reduces your tax liability, whereas a deduction reduces your taxable income. And it's a minor distinction, I suppose. But in terms of corporate giving, it is very rare for member states to opt for a tax credit as a tax measure. And so I would argue that that, in fact, makes us a more attractive jurisdiction when it comes to corporations determining where they want to domicile. And then, just to do some benchmarking around what are the kind of thresholds and amounts that are available as benefit, looking at regions like Belgium, where 5% of taxable income or 500,000 euros is the maximum threshold that is eligible as a deduction in their scheme. And I wanted to highlight here where we don't have a maximum cap. And in fact, we have a minimum threshold to be eligible to receive it in the first place. And France has a tax credit of up to 60% of the actual amount donated, but it's on a sliding scale. It reduces when you exceed 2 million euro. It's only at 40% of the amount that's donated. And there are some who are possibly more competitive. Cyprus has 100% of the donation is eligible for tax deduction, and there is no maximum. And so I'm glad we do have some guardrails in that space to ensure that is not the entire donation. It just is an incentive for continuing to give. And to the points that my colleagues raised around leakage, I would argue that we should focus on the impact as opposed to who's necessarily receiving the credit and not paying into the tax. This money is still going to charitable organizations that are delivering essential services to the people most in need in Bermuda. And so if some of these companies who are not within the scope of having to pay corporate income tax, but are electing to give charitable donations, I think on net there, that's still a good thing, right? I would challenge someone to argue that point. Right, yeah, I challenge. I welcome it. I think you've expended your questions, but there are many senators who have not taken the mic yet and may want to make an argument for why it is objectionably unfair that some of the local insurers, who I might add, we're required to make that provision, right? The OECD said for the corporate income tax scheme that you cannot unfairly benefit only one segment of the industry. It must be applied to all of them. And as such, we have responded to that requirement. Recently, kind of just notable current event in the tax space, as we're looking at something that fundamentally shifts how Bermuda collects tax. Switzerland had a kind of referendum around a wealth tax, or more specifically around asset transfer to inheritance. And unfortunately, 78% of the voters voted it down. And the provision they had proposed was that 50% of all assets and gifts in excess of 50 million Swiss francs would be in scope, and only 43% of eligible voters did vote. So it's not the majority of the country, but it was notable that that was unsuccessful. Although as I dug a bit deeper, it came to light that part of the reason they did vote it down is because they have a kind of distributed tax system similar to the United States, where there's federal tax and then individual states set their own kind of rule sets around what taxes will be. And cantons in Switzerland, like Basel-Landgraf, already have a 49% asset transfer tax in relation to non-related people receiving the benefit of that estate. And Geneva itself has a 45% rate there as well. And so just, on the tax space, while we're looking at ways to make our tax system more progressive, I put to the public, give some thought to mechanisms like that, which would help to reduce the income inequality we are experiencing. And finally, bringing it back to benefits to the third sector, I touched on it briefly. The provisions for eligibility, that kind of minimum threshold, it stabilizes charitable funding. And apologies, Madam President, I didn't declare my interest when I started my spiel, but I sit on the board of CHUSTIC, which is a charitable organization. And so I welcome this change. One of the things we often discuss at our meetings is funding and the inability to do long-term strategic planning, like multi-year, because often you're just looking to, well, what can we feasibly raise for the next year? By providing this incentive such that it needs to be $100,000 a year or more to receive the tax credit means organizations like CHUSTIC and others delivering much needed services can have more stability and benefit from these kind of multi-year commitments, which I imagine will arise after we enact this law. And then of note, my colleagues often, part of their refrain includes things like accountability. And so I wanted to highlight that the charities that are the recipients of these donations must have done their annual filings. And so that's ensuring that there's accountability and governance of these third sector entities, and directs corporate giving towards Bermuda focused programs by that provision being in there as well. And I guess before I cede my time, I just wanted to come back again to kind of one of the more frequent opposing points, that I've seen. Well, if we tax the companies, they'll leave. That, the common sense, I guess, air quotes, is that if you tax wealthy people, they will leave your jurisdiction. And again, I challenge that argument. I've done some reading. I haven't read enough through the book to kind of speak to it in great detail, but I just want to highlight some of the points I've come across already as I have.
Point of order, Madam President. Nobody has said that. Nobody has said that today. I don't know what that's in reference to.
It's feedback I receive while canvassing and discussing the issue in the public. I'm not directing it at any specific senator.
Senator Fubler has the right to express his views. Senator Fubler, have you?
Apologies if I was misunderstood. I did not direct it as an argument posed by any of my colleagues here in the Senate, just as one that is kind of in the general public when discussions around taxation are raised. I think I've not stepped outside the bounds there. Thank you. Yes. And so the book I wanted to highlight that I would recommend, I'm enjoying reading through it so far, is The Myth of Millionaire Tax Flight: How Place Matters for the Rich. And it's by a gentleman, Christopher Young. He published it in 2017. And he is an associate professor of sociology at Cornell University, and he specializes in economic sociology, social stratification, and most importantly, quantitative methodology. So measuring things, putting measurements to them. Qualitative assessment is important as well, but we all like our stats. And so in his methodology, he examined U.S. tax returns of top income earners, which he classed as people earning more than $1 million US. And he goes in the book, he talks about the reason for selecting America is because the barrier to relocation is much lower than if you were to move from one country to another, right? Reestablishing yourself or your company in another state is definitely much easier than moving to an international jurisdiction. And he argues that income earning is embedded in concrete, ongoing systems of social relations, and especially in insurance and reinsurance, which I think we can all agree are some of the entities that will be first in scope for having to pay corporate income tax. I work in reinsurance myself in my day job, and I know relationships are key. And, people are in Bermuda, not just for the way that the tax system is set up, but because it is a hub full of highly skilled individuals who know the industry. And there are other players here who they leverage those relationships. And also in the same book, there's an interesting survey in 2011 by the investment group Spectrum, and they found that a sizable minority of their clients that they surveyed, 67% to be specific, supported higher tax on millionaires. Another notable quote: "The Patriotic Millionaires," an interesting name. It founded in 2015, I believe. It's an activist group of over 150 U.S. millionaires as of 2019, and they advocate for increased tax payment by the wealthy, and they advocate for an initiative called the Buffett Rule, which was kind of a tax plan in the Obama era that spoke to having millionaires and billionaires pay the same tax rate as middle-class families and working people, which I think is something all of us here in the Senate today can agree is right and just. And a notable quote from them is, "We, the millionaires, have been the biggest beneficiaries of this system called America, and we should pay more to keep it running. We have reaped the greatest share of the benefits. We should contribute the largest portion of the investment." And I think that sentiment is transferable to the corporate entities we see here in Bermuda. They have realized significant benefit operating out of this internationally renowned global hub for insurance and reinsurance. And so it stands that they should also contribute the largest portion of the investment. I think that is fair. And on that note, Madam President, I cede my time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Fubler, for your comments. Now we will pass over to the substantive minister, Crystal Caesar, the spokesperson for finance, to address the questions that have been raised by both Senators Cunningham and Senators Tenner.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. And my colleagues have given me some work to do this morning to collate and listen and collect answers and make some sound sense of what those answers should be. So I will attempt to answer those questions. If I do gloss over or do not answer anything, I believe that we have an ability to have another bite at the cherry. So I think what our colleagues need to recognize is that this is still an evolving regime, and we are in the process of continuing to gather information on credits, how they will be administered. In fact, just in January, which is right around the corner, quite frankly, we will be continuing to engage with stakeholders on this regime such that we can ensure that credits are being handled in an appropriate fashion. But to be specific about some of the questions that have been asked, the non-CIT taxpayers are required, and companies, our CIT payers are actually required to provide returns by the end of January, where they are intending to claim some of these credits. And so the process for administering them, as I said, is still being worked on. So this is we're still in development of how we're going to be handling some of these credits. Specifically as it pertains to the eligibility of a workday, companies will need to obviously comply with the overarching regime as it pertains to what a workday looks like. But obviously the companies will be able to administer that as they deem necessary in terms of what the calculation of a workday looks like. But obviously it still needs to fall within what the tax credit regime guidance provides. As it pertains to scholarships, just give me 2 seconds. I have the answer here. It's certainly not meant to be a detriment to scholarships. Companies will, I'm sorry, give me 2 seconds. Okay. Have the answer. Okay, yes. So it's not, there isn't meant to be an impact on how charities will be able to engage with those who are giving, how charities are giving scholarships. But we're continuing to engage with those charities such that those are who are giving scholarships, there may very well be the ability to get credits. But again, the regime is being determined. As one would recognize, credits have the potential to also reduce insurance costs, where companies benefit from certain credits, and those benefits will be measured through an economic analysis of any changes on island in terms of investment and arising from those credits. So there are varying different manners in which these credits can be calculated. It also, as one would know, that with any OECD changes that may come down the pipe, we may need to reconsider how some of those credits are calculated, right? So this is a first stab at it, and some of the provision of how credits will be apportioned, it's still in development. I do actually have an answer for Senator Tannick as it pertains to the provision of the TIN, or tax identification numbers. And in particular, if a TIN, if a company has, or a group of companies have a TIN number, and they are one legal company and they don't elect separate taxation of those segregated accounts, they will have one number. But if they have elected for those segregated accounts to be separate, then they will get separate TINs. So I hope that helps in terms of definition. But again, I'm going to continue to stress that this is still the provision, the regime is still being developed, and as to how it will actually be utilized going forward. We're still engaging with stakeholders as to how these credits will be used, what they will be apportioned to, and which companies will actually get the benefit therein. I want to ensure that I'm answering the majority of the questions. Yes. So in terms of, because we have heard the terminology of leakage, and the policy is to incentivize on-island investment in key strategic areas, which we've spoken about today, which is charitable bodies, tax credits, and substance-based credits. So it's not just a question of, it's not a question of leakage. We are encouraging on-island investment in these key strategic areas, and that may expand in the future as the regime evolves, right? So again, these are a lot of the questions that we have are forward thinking, and which is appreciated, because again, this gives us the ability to give further consideration as to how the regime will ultimately evolve. But some of those answers are still in development.
Senator Tannock.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. First, I must apologize to Senator Farbit. Fobler, sorry,
Fobler.
Senator Fobler. I thought that you were saying that you were responding to something that was said in the Senate. So my apologies. Look, to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I am very, very sorry for interrupting you, and thank you for providing us with that valuable information. And I actually will look up the flight, the Brooklyn Millionaire flight. Thank you. So my apologies. The second is thank you to Minister Caesar for your informed response, and just generally, thank you to the Bermuda government. As Deputy Chairperson of ABIC, the Association of Bermuda International Companies, we have been on this journey with the government for years. We understand how the government has advocated on Bermuda's behalf to the OECD, and how we've had partnerships with the government and with other entities. And so I understand that this has been a long road, and we are not at the end yet. So I appreciate all the hard work that's gone under this. Thank you, Minister Caesar, for your response regarding the TINs and SAG accounts. I appreciate that, and my hope is that guidance will be issued to that effect, that other entities can avail themselves of, if it's not readily available somewhere already. Thank you very much for indicating that there will be measurements I think you said potential to reduce insurance costs will be analyzed through by the benefits through measured analysis. So that would be really interesting to see if our local companies avail themselves of that. So thank you. I do have two questions arising out of, well, actually, yeah, two. Number one, my question regarding the clarification of eligible employees was not addressed. So my request was that when we look at workforce and headcount, can we get clarity over, for instance, like I said, for Section 17, it's specifically states that counted in that head count, you do not count employees who are here on a work permit. It does not say that everywhere else. I think it might say it in one more section, which I can't quote off the top of my head. So my question is, when employers are looking at this, when do they know when to count people who are work permit holders and when not to count employees that are work permit holders? Because the legislation is very careful not to give a description or not to state the categories of persons who are deemed to be eligible employees. So for instance, it doesn't say Bermudian, spouse of, PRC, BOTC. So how can we review that? That's my first one that wasn't answered. And then my second one was regarding how a company looks at their workday. So the legislation basically says that for it to be a workday, it has to be a business day. So from the start, right, it has to be Monday through Friday. It says no public holidays, no Saturdays. That's a way to think of it. However, you would have thought there would have been more flexibility around a business being able to say, look, actually, we have a flexible work schedule. So some people work on Saturdays, but do not work on Fridays. Under this legislation, that would not be. Even if you worked an 8-hour day that you got compensated for on a Saturday, you would not be covered under this, as your business would not be covered under this as being able to claim an expense. I think that's short-sighted when we look at work days. However, my question was regarding, there are statutory amounts that employers must cover with regard to maternity leave, with regard to sick leave, that you have to cover for your employee. However, this legislation seems to say that when you are covering that statutory sick leave, that statutory mat leave, that actually does not constitute a work day. However, the government mandates that employers cover this for their employees on what would be a work day. So my question was, why was that decision made, or was I misinterpreting it? And if you have an employee who is out sick, they still get calculated when you are doing that, because right now it says bereavement leave, maternity leave, sick leave, you are not constituted as being a work day. I think that might be maybe TAN 3A. And then TAN 2A says something like a work day is a business day. And like I said, if you decide, as an entity, that you have a flexible work schedule and somebody can work 8 hours on a Saturday, that is also not counted. So those were my questions around, number one, eligible employees, and then this whole issue of constitutional work days.
Thank you, Senator Tanner.
And if I have misquoted a section, please forgive me. I do not have the act out in front of me, so I was just trying to get to the salient points.
Madam AG, you wanted to speak.
I did. Thank you, Madam President. And I was hoping that I might be able to wrap up some of the apparently outstanding questions with my comments. First, let me say I'm glad that this piece of legislation has broad support. I believe the government has tried its best to bring everyone along, and I believe Senator Cunningham referenced that earlier. I think that my colleague, Senator Caesar, has clearly stated that how credits can be calculated is something that can still be the subject of determination. And so I think this is trying to answer the question posed by Senator Tanner. And let me say, having had a role as a general counsel of an international insurer, if I were in my seat in that capacity, I certainly would be arguing for work structures that qualify. So there is an opportunity for every taxpayer to make the case as to why they say something qualifies. And that is why the legislation provides for a place to have a disagreement about what might be determined as a final tax credit. So we have an appeal process around that. You may say, this is what's been determined. I believe it should be determined on another basis. We have been thoughtful in the legislation in providing a place for an appeal process to happen. I take the point about different work days and certainly on remote work. On the question of how you count employees, whether they're there or not, I think one has to have the understanding of the overriding objective. So the overriding objective in the tax credits is to encourage employment here. And I can think, I have a friend who's a lawyer, I've had two actually, and they reached a point in their careers where they were just covering maternity leave. Now, if you think about it, if you had a Bermudian lawyer going on maternity leave and you had a non-Bermudian covering that leave, that would not count. Having the ability to double count for the same job is not what's intended here. The idea is to ensure that the credits accrue to Bermudians holding those positions. I think there was a further question about what is a Bermudian and when does it count? So the legislation has been very clear in not trying to get into the categories of what passports people hold, but saying that for the credit section around substance, which relates to employability, for that section alone, it is about whether non-work permit holders are the measurement. So that could be, you could be the spouse of a Bermudian, you've been on the island for a long time, you don't need a work permit. You count in Bermudian employment in that manner. So that is why the divide looks that way, and it is in the substance section. I'd further circle back to the question that Senator Cunningham asked, which is about scholarships. So I certainly was aware of a company, a large insurer. They had an agreement years ago with Cedar Bridge Academy where they did direct scholarships. So they were not operating their scholarships through a charity, right? I would argue, for that company, if I were sitting in the seat of their as a general counsel, or having to make the argument for them on how their credits could apply, that doesn't have to be under the community section. It could be under the substance section, because you can clearly relate how that giving relates to you being able to take advantage of a substance credit. So I think there are different ways of doing it. And certainly it has been my firsthand experience is that many companies in relation to corporate giving have, for the reasons I think that Senator Cunningham pointed out, have needed for other reasons, right, to be able to clarify their charitable contributions in Bermuda in a more robust governance framework. And for that reason, they've used, for example, putting those funds to BFIS or asking the Bermuda Community Foundation to take on the administration of those funds so that it meets this international guidelines for governance that they may have to answer to if they're in an international group that happens to be Bermuda headed. The final thing that I would say, maybe it's not final, but is this question on equity. Mm-hmm. So I've heard it said in other places that are like you have the companies over 750 million euro being captured for the payment of CIT. The credit regime could relate to anyone. There seems to be an inequity. There's not an inequity. This legislation, you don't get something for nothing. In order to take advantage of the credits under this piece of legislation that we're looking at right now, a company must demonstrate that they've covered those 3 areas or 2 areas or one of them. So for a local insurer that's also international, as we say, a local insurer that falls under the threshold, and I think there's been reference here to maybe Old Shores or a CG, we are still trying to incentivize that company to put more jobs in Bermuda. And we do know, and I know, declaring a former interest, I sat on the board of Argus, right? Argus, Old Shores now, CG, they all have operations that are outside of Bermuda. So there is an incentive here to say, can you think about how to bring jobs onshore that you might have taken offshore? The whole point of this piece of legislation is try to incentivize more economic activity here, and the reward in the tax credit is for doing that. So you can't get a reward for doing nothing. And I think that that's some of what is in the kind of public domain, that, you have these big companies paying and these other companies are going to take advantage of getting a credit. No, you get a credit for your own work that you're able to demonstrate in this legislation. And finally, as I said before, there is an opportunity to challenge and appeal those a decision on what might be counted towards your credits and what is not. And finally, Madam President, now it's finally. I am pleased that that there is support. There was support in another place, and that there is support in the Senate for this really, really important piece of legislation. Both pieces, part of the some of the negativity that has been attached internationally and in the UK by some ministers is around, this idea that Bermuda is a tax haven, this idea that, Bermuda might be a place where we are not robust in our anti-money laundering and corruption regimes. The 2 pieces of legislation and the whole of the CIT, it's standing up, and these pieces of legislation indicate that Bermuda is a place where transparency is important, and the existence of the 15% as minimum global tax and Bermuda adopting it, and we've been a front runner, right, is important to the jurisdiction for those reasons as well, Madam President. It indicates that we have substance. It completely kills the argument that Bermuda is somehow a jurisdiction for tax evasion or tax haven. And for those reasons, it continues to be important, but we do understand that refinement may be necessary, like everything. We may not get it all right out of the blocks, but to have the constant opportunity to go back with industry and engage on where we are going and getting stakeholder input at every point along this process is what has happened, and it is what will continue to happen as we go forward, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam AG, Minister of Justice. Back to you, Minister Caesar, for your
Yes, and
responses to questions.
thank you, Madam President. And again, thank you for the support and the qualifying questions, which helps to edify not just us, but also the listening public. So I do appreciate the interventions of my colleagues and also the questions, which help to educate us all. With that said, Madam President, I move that the bill entitled Tax Credits 2025 be read for a second time.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. And I correct that. It should be Tax Credit Act 2025.
Yes.
Should be read for a second time.
Mhm.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that Standing Order 26 be suspended in respect of this bill.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the bill entitled the Tax Credit Act 2025 be now read a third time.
Is there any objection to the third reading? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the bill do now pass.
It has been moved that the bill entitled Tax Credits Act 2025 do not pass. Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. The bill is passed. Thank you, Minister Caesar, spokesperson for Finance, for presenting the bill, and to all senators who have responded to questions. We'll now move on with our third item on the orders of the day, and that is consideration of the Statistics, Census of Population and Housing Order 2025, and that's in the name of Senator Lauren F. Bell, Junior Minister for Economy and Labor. Senator Bell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the provisions of Standing Order 71-2 be suspended.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Madam President, I move that Senate do now take under consideration the Statistics, Census of Population and Housing Order 2025 proposed to be made by the Minister responsible for statistics in exercise of the power conferred by Section 5(3) of the Statistics Acts 2002.
Is there any objection to that motion? No objection.
Thank you, Madam President. The matter before this Honorable Senate is consideration of the order entitled Statistics, Census of Population and Housing Order 2025. Madam President, in less than 6 months, the Department of Statistics will begin collecting the 2026 census information from residents of Bermuda. The collection of census information is a mammoth task for any country. We will accomplish this work by using a multi-module approach, which includes electronic options, telephone interviews, and personal interviews. Madam President, I would like to remind this Honorable Senate that the information collected during the census is of paramount importance to the development of both social and economic policy. It is for this reason that all residents are required to provide census information to the census officer. I therefore encourage every resident of Bermuda to cooperate fully with the census officer when asked to provide census information. Madam President, the primary purpose of this order is to confer upon the Director of Statistics the legal authority to take a census of Bermuda and to establish Wednesday, May 20th, 2026, as Census Day. Census Day is the day on which all data is referred to by the census officers. In other words, whether you complete the census on July 1st or October 31st, persons are expected to recall the details of Wednesday, May 20th, 2026, in all responses to the census. The Director of Statistics, through this order, is authorized to collect information in respect of any or all of the subject matters that will be covered during census taken. Madam President, the following broad subject matters will be addressed during census taken. 1, where a person spent census night. 2, characteristics including sex, age, religion, etc. 3, birthplace and language. 4, immigration. 5, Bermudian status. 6, living arrangements. 7, health. 8, marital status. 9, fertility. 10, education. 11, economic activity. 12, income from main job. 13, income from other sources. 14, household members and visitors. 15, dwelling characteristics. 16, household characteristics. And 17, emigration. Madam President, the census questionnaire includes new topics on language, living arrangement, and household characteristics. The language data will provide a better understanding of Bermuda's linguistic diversity. while the information collected under living arrangements will provide details on the type, duration, and reason for the living situation of household members. This will provide benchmark data on the population's experience with homelessness, insecure housing, and inadequate housing. Meanwhile, the household characteristic topic will collect information on the number of mobile devices, the ability to afford an unexpected expense, and financial assistance. These questions help us understand access to mobile devices, who is in need, and how people are coping. The data collected from these questions will be vital for developing, monitoring, and evaluating policies. Madam President, the order authorizes the Director of Statistics to take a census beginning Thursday, the 21st of May, 2026, and ending no later than Wednesday, 31st of March, 2027. During the data collection period, the following persons are obligated to provide a census officer with information regarding any or all of the matters mentioned previously as they stood on Census Day. And these include the household reference person. This is the person who's responsible or mainly responsible for running the affairs of a household. Household members, persons who have attained the age of 16 years on Census Day. Persons in charge of a hotel or an institution, as well as persons in charge of other persons on board a government ship or vessel who were in Bermuda on census night. Madam President, in another place, an explanation was provided as to why data is collected from persons as young as 16 years old and not from age 18 years instead. Madam President, data is traditionally collected in a census or a government survey from persons aged 16 years and older. Evidence of this is found in respect to regular surveys such as the Labor Force Survey and the Employment Survey, as well as past censuses. In Bermuda, this is also the age when persons can technically get married, obtain a license to ride an auxiliary cycle, and to work. As the census will collect data about economic activity and income, asking persons as young as 16 years old will provide a more accurate picture of employment in Bermuda. Madam President, we are determined to secure as much information as possible so that sound policies can be developed and government's efforts and resources can be strategically deployed as we continue our work on behalf of the people of Bermuda. Madam President, I commend this order to the Senate for its consideration and support.
Thank you, Senator Lauren Bell. Senator Tannock, you have questions too.
Yes, I do have a question or a comment. Now, Senator Bell, what are you trying to do asking people where they were census night? Because I think that might mean that the uptake might not be as great as the government might like. Thank you.
Thank you, fellow Senator Tannock, for that. And you can appreciate from a statistical perspective, this is a standard questions as asked in all of our census, not only locally, but globally. But thank you for that.
Senator Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Senator Bell, Junior Minister, for that statement. I note, and I believe in the past, that the census data has been collected purely from individuals or Department of Statistics staff going around and actually physically knocking on the doors and asking. And you mentioned a multi-pronged approach with electronic and phone interviews. I was just wondering how the Department of Statistics is getting that phone and email data in order to call people or email them. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. While the senator is getting a response to this, I would just like to acknowledge the presence in the chamber of the Permanent Secretary for Economy and Labor, Ms. Zadine Secretary Price, as well as Mrs. Levette Tannock from the AG's Chambers and Mrs. Melinda Williams from the Department of Statistics. Welcome to you all.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Senator Cunningham, for her question. So for clarity, we did use electronic means in the last census to collect some data. Now, we are using, as my brief explained, we're using electronic means, telephone interviews, or personal interviews, right? Now, although there are different strategies for conducting the 2026 population housing census, we are strongly encouraging households to choose the e-census option, as it is the most efficient and least expensive forms of data collection method that we will be employing. Completing the census online is simple and convenient, and it can be completed in the comfort of one's own home. Now, in 2010 and 2016, the Department of Statistics worked with other government departments, ministries, and agencies, as well as the private sector, to allow employees to provide census information for themselves and their households during the workday. The Department of Statistics will continue to use this strategy during the 2026 census. I hope that answers your question.
Supplemental. So
Yes, certainly you can.
thank you,
Cunningham.
Senator Bell. So what I'm hearing then is it's not necessarily email. It is, I will go on Victoria Cunningham onto some kind of portal. I can put in my address or whatever other clarifying identifier and complete it online. So my question then is, how are we going to, and I 100% agree that, it reduces the costs. Hopefully it would reduce the 10 months required or been allocated to collect this data. How are you going to not necessarily incentivize, but inform members of the public that this is the way to do it, notwithstanding that some seniors might have issues, but how are we going to make sure, I'm assuming a public campaign or something, that people are aware that this is something they should be doing? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cunningham.
Yes, so there definitely will be a public campaign to provide detailed information about how to access the e-census. And for those persons who are not comfortable providing information through the e-census, there will be the opportunity to do telephone interviews or person-to-person interviews.
Senators, it would appear those are the only questions.
Thank you, Madam President. Given there are no other questions, I move that this said draft order be approved and that the following message be sent to His Excellency the Governor. May it please Your Excellency, the Senate, having had under consideration the draft order entitled the Statistics Census of Population and Housing Order 2025, proposed to be made by the Minister responsible for statistics in exercise of the power conferred by Section 5(3) of the Statistics Act 2002, has the honor to inform Your Excellency that the Senate has approved the said draft order.
Is there any objection to the motion being sent? Or no objection, so the consideration of the Statistics, Census, Population, and Housing Order has been approved by the Senate, and the message will be sent to the Governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam
Senator
President.
Bell, Junior Minister of Economy and Labor, for presenting your bill, and all senators who have responded. We will now move on with our agenda, and that is item number 14, motions. There are none. Item number 15 on our order paper, congratulatory and or obituary speeches. Senator Tannock, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to crave a couple of minutes of the listening public and our chamber's indulgence to say congratulations to the marketplace for another fantastic Christmas parade, and to go a little bit deeper about the marketplace and the Christmas parade. As many will know who watched the drones show on Sunday night and who read anything about the Christmas parade, it was dedicated to the memory of Vernon Hassel, who was the Vice President of Purchasing and Procurement at Marketplace, who died unexpectedly in September and has left a void that I know that his family and colleagues are feeling. And this is only the second time since the Christmas parade started in 1994 that it's been dedicated to somebody's memory. The first time was in 1994, and it was dedicated to the memory of Albert Ferrara. And then this year to Vernon Hassel. And all the staff that participate in the Marketplace Christmas Parade do so on a volunteer basis. It is what the Christmas Parade calls their day of giving, and they appreciate the support from the community and that it reflects the value. And they wanted to dedicate it to the memory of Vernon, because Vernon was a man whose life they believe reflected the very best of Bermuda's values: hard work, opportunity, and the power of community support. They thank the community organizations that participate, and they look at it as a way to highlight the best of Bermuda and coming together as a community. But it doesn't just stop there, Madam President. What the Marketplace has done, and many people would wonder, well, why does she care? Well, I have to tell you that I grew up with the Hassels. I grew up with Vernon and his family. I know the impact that he had in Marketplace, but also on those around him, and had the privilege of speaking at his homegoing ceremony on behalf of his parents. And when I was at the funeral, I learned that Marketplace intended to launch a Vernon Hassel Scholarship. And what I would like to do is talk a little bit about that scholarship and highlight it. Marketplace has created the Vernon Hassel Scholarship to encourage career growth within the Marketplace supermarts and help team members gain education skills needed for advancement and internal promotion. By supporting young Bermudians and our own associates, we continue Vernon's legacy of learning, opportunity, and service to the community. The Marketplace establishing the Vernon Hassel Scholarship is in honor of a man whose career reflected dedication, growth, and lifelong commitment to excellence. Vernon began in the supermarket business as a young bag packer, a grocery packer. Later, he earned his university degree with the support of the Ferrara family and went on to work more than 25 years with the Marketplace. His career path shows how, with dedication and opportunity, a meaningful career can be shaped. The Vernon Hassel Scholarship is designed to give Bermudian students and Marketplace associates the chance to grow into future leaders of our industry. The scholarship will provide financial support for studies in business, retail management, food and nutrition, marketing, logistics, and all areas essential to the grocery sector and daily operations. Its Marketplace and grocery sector is resilient and necessary, of course, and it's great to have this opportunity for young Bermudians and advancement in this career path. And so I would just like to highlight that and encourage young Bermudians who are interested in careers in the grocery business. I think the last time that I remember Vernon being quoted might have been around the issue of food security at the Food Security Commission in June 2025. So when we look at alternative career paths and we look at alternative career practices, we can't discount the impact that alternative careers can have on supporting the island and the community. And to see Vernon, who started as a grocery packer and rose to become Vice President of Purchasing and Procurement at Marketplace, is a true inspiration. And I speak for all when I say that we valued his dedication and appreciate the Christmas parade and this scholarship in his behalf.
Thank you, Senator Tennant. Would any other senator? Senator Lindsey Simmons, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I would like to declare my interest, first of all, as the president of the Foster Parent Association, charity number 620, and also the GM Minister of Youth, Social Development, and Seniors. But long before I was GM Minister, I was a foster parent. I began my career as a foster parent when I was 24. And 9 years ago, I established the Angel Tree. And I just want to take a moment to thank companies like Renre Denise Nanette reached out to me when I first started, and their employees, not the company, but the employees that work there, take our angels and get gifts for children in foster care. But I had a vision when I did the angel tree that it was going to be bigger than just the foster children. So I reached out to my friend Patrina Painter, and I asked her, can you give me some children from Big Brothers and Big Sisters? So she gave me all her littles, and they went on the tree as well. For 9 years, we have been giving gifts such as laptops, iPads, gift certificates for clothes, dolls, you name it. I know that Renry has helped a young man who is paralyzed. He has aged out of the foster care system, but they continue to help the family. It's everyday Bermudians that come and collect these angels. I had one lady that came and got an angel. She came back, and so we have more angels, took 2 more. I put it up on my status that I still had 4 angels that needed to be done. She took another angel, and she didn't buy little gifts. She started with a laptop and then huge gift certificates for these children. I want to thank Holly Pacheco. She's been there with Dantations, and they collect the angels as well. And her parents from the dance teams come along and they take angels. But it's the everyday Bermudians that help foster children, Big Brothers and Big Sisters. We now do the hymns. We also help with the independent living. We also do Teen Haven. We do mirrors. We do so many. This year we've got over 400 angels. And I'm happy to say that we have 1 more angel, but I could guarantee by the end of this week, all angels will be accounted for, and every child for Christmas will be getting an angel. But I say thank you to the public for rallying around us. We are different from other organizations that don't just ask for you to drop a toy in a bin and hopefully they go to the right child, or the presents are sitting there for a year. And I'm not knocking any other organization. That's not what I'm doing. But what I do say is we reach out and ask everybody, what would you like for Christmas? And I can say that every year the children get almost everything they ask for, and I'm thankful for that, because I can't imagine not living in my parents' home and having to live with a stranger who's got to make Christmas special for me. So I thank the public for making Christmas a little bit special for our angels. So thank you. And I want to take a quick second to say we need foster parents. We need people to sign up, call Selena Simons at Family Services, because I know that just recently I was contacted, but I have a situation where I already have a baby in my house. But there are so many children that are still in need of a home. So I encourage anybody, if you have time, if you have the space, reach out. I want to dispel the myths. You do not get paid to be a foster parent. You do get a stipend to help with the groceries, but this is a labor of love. So I encourage everybody to think if they have the space or the time, because it's not for everybody, let's be honest. But if you do, please reach out to Selena Simons at Family Services, because we can always use more foster parents, more good homes. And there is a thing called respite. You might not be able to take a child every day, but maybe once a month when that child needs to go for the weekend to somebody else's house, you can respite and take the child for just a couple of days. So there's different ways to be a foster parent. It doesn't have to be every day, 365 days a year, but I encourage everybody. It's a blessing to help these children, and I encourage everybody to do it. So thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Lindsay Simmons. Would any other senator care to speak? Senator Michelle Favla, you have the floor.
Getting the whole gamut today. Herbert, Michelle, Misha. Well, it's fine. It's not the first or the last time. No offense taken to any of you.
I'm sorry.
I put my hand up
Oh, my
today
goodness
to cover
me.
some congratulations. First, I'd like to
Mr. Favla,
associate.
I am sorry.
No problem. Thank you, Madam President. Associate myself with the comments for the Santa parade. My family ventured down at the weekend, and the kids had a great time. Even my 4-year-old, who had to leave after about 58 minutes because he was sick and ended up staying home the next day. But my 7-year-old loved it. We were there until the end. Quite enjoyed the drone show and fireworks. Great to have those both back things that were supported through the Tourism Investment Act, I'd like to add. Also, would like to give congratulations to the members of the PLP Constituency 29, which is Southampton East, the one neighboring to where I ran in the recent election. They hosted their annual seniors tea. It was my second year in attendance, and it was a great afternoon for seniors across the island. I spoke to folks from St. George's to Somerset who said they've been coming for many years and they quite enjoyed the afternoon of tea and conversation and games and performances. And so again, to Constituency 29, job well done. And finally, I'd like to highlight the group, declare my interest, including Uncle Glenn, who put on an event commemorating the 70th, that's my math's right, 70th anniversary of Rosa Parks deciding she'd had enough. Right? Refusing to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery. That was the impetus for the Montgomery bus boycott. We had performances from Barclay Institute. Their dancers were great. Actually, I think their photo made the Royal Gazette, who reported on it. But also we had a singer from Cedar Bridge Academy. So both of the public high schools were represented. We also had an interesting presentation from Justice Juan Wolf, who talked about the power of unified resistance, something that is essential to ending social injustice. The lecture, of course, given his own experience, focused on the law specifically, and he shared a photo of Rosa Parks's booking photo, at the precinct when they arrested her for refusing to comply. It took 381 days for them to realize success, to end the segregation of the buses in Montgomery. And it is in stark contrast, 22 years later, we had, I think it was 11 days of boycotting here in Bermuda to effectively end segregation. And so you can see over time that power of unified resistance accelerates the time span. You can see, not always, of course, there are some examples globally where it's taking multiple countries well over a year, 2 years, several years, 70 years, depending on how far you want to go back, to end the oppression of marginalized groups. And but it takes the efforts of all of us, whether in person or through funding or through lending your time and talent to that cause. I encourage all of you, I'm sure you have something you're passionate about, either locally or internationally, and give some time, especially as we come into the kind of holiday season, the season of giving, that you and kind of doubling down on my colleague Senator Simmons' appeals to those who give of your time as a foster parent. I don't think I have that in me, but I know that I can contribute in other ways, and I give, extreme kudos to those who choose to do it. It is a selfless act, and they deserve all of the praise. And on that note, I will cede my time. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Misha Pablo. I apologize. I think Senator Victoria Cunningham, you can have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I just quickly wanted to congratulate BMDS on an amazing pantomime. I have to say, it's been a few years since I've been down to City Hall for the pantomime, but Jack and D Beanstalk was great. I mean, it's amazing to see the talent that Bermuda has on stage, and true panto fashion, a lot of audience participation. So I just wanted to say congratulations to BMDS. And I also wanted to thank ABIR, who hosted a reception celebrating leadership in international business last week, for hosting their event at AXA XL. They alluded to their special topics course, which is held in conjunction with Bermuda College, which they started up in COVID. To provide 14 weeks. It's actually a credit course for Bermuda College, but they have sometimes 600, 700 people registered just to listen from the community and students overseas. But delighted that ABIR have passed the baton to BFIS, which is my organization, to carry that forward. So I just want to thank ABIR for laying the foundation of a successful course. I'm thinking that Bermuda College might want to start one up for hospitality, because it does actually show a lot of the different facets of international business. They could do it in hospitality. But I think, it's hopefully going to continue for many years. And then finally, our students are all heading back to the island for the holidays. So wish them all safe travels. If any of them have got exams coming up, all the best in their exams, and look forward to seeing them over the Christmas break. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cunningham. Would any other senator care to speak? Yes, Senator Dion Smith, you have the floor.
Good day, Madam President.
Day to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to give condolences to the family of Kathy Ann Lynn Ray. She worked at Guardsman Bermuda Security Group in BGA. To the family of Celine Colleen Elizabeth Deal. That's the sister of Major Barrett Deal and family. To the family of Sherry Lynn Egan Golden. The family of Ingrid Pitt. And the family of Garth Hayward and Lawrence Reyna. They have my deepest condolences. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dion Smith. Would any other senator care to speak? Yes, Senator Tariq Dunbar Smith, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon to listening audience and my Senate colleagues. Just a few obits. Just want to send out a backing my colleague here, Dion, Miss Ray, her daughter, Shanae, and I, friends from the Barkley Institute. Her and her family do have my deepest condolences. I'd also like to send my condolences to the family of Gerald Fubler. Mr. Fubler was my first cricket coach who came and took a lot of us young boys in Ordred and gave us something to do in the summertime other than jumping off the roof at Soul Kettle Ferry Dock. So my condolences to Mr. Fubler and his family. He was very impactful for us young boys to give us something other than football and running through the trees to do in the summertime in Ordred. Also, the family of Miss June North. I do send my deepest condolences. Her son, Scuzzy, is a teammate of my son, Roman's, when he was here in Bermuda doing go-karting. Scuzzy is a good friend of mine. And also, Miss North is a relative of my Mrs. Susan, so she is a relative of Roman. So my condolences to her and her family. And also a extended condolences to the family of Deanna Wade. She was an enormous presence in tourism Bermuda. She is very instrumental in many of the massive cruise lines and cruise ships we see in the dockyard every summer. That is very impactful to our tourism industry. So to her and her family, my deepest condolences. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tariq Dunbar Smith. Would any other senator? Yes, Minister Caesar, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I would like to just highlight over the last 10 days or so, several primary school choirs have participated in the Great Carol-Off, Christmas Carol-Off down at Skyport. And so several different school choirs participate in on different days in which they bring their A game, and the winners concert is actually happening this Saturday. So in 2 days' time down at Skyport from 7 to 9. And so those that can attend, I encourage them to do so, to encourage our young people. It's great to see young people participating in the creative arts. This has actually become a staple in the Bermuda holiday time calendar. So there will be performances from the winning choirs. There will be entertainment. There's a market, and even a local entertainer will be there as well. And I wanted to say congratulations to all participants. I think we sometimes underestimate the power of the creative arts. And so it's good to see that the department and other private schools as well, I believe, have also attended and participated. So I'm just happy to note that if you want some entertainment this Saturday evening from 7 to 9 down at the LF Wade International Airport, the Skyport Great Christmas Carol-Off will be happening. So thank you, Madam President.
And thank you, Minister Caesar. Yes. Senator Lauren Bell, I see you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I'd like to also join my Senate colleagues, in particular Senator Tannick, who and Senator Misha Fubler, who did attend the Marketplace Christmas Parade. Again, it's a wonderful event. My children and my grandchildren attended the event and had a great time. It's such a wonderful community event, brings all sectors of our community out. So I want to associate myself with those comments, and also the comments from Senator Cunningham for the BMDS's pantomime. I had the great pleasure of taking my grandchildren and some of my children to the pantomime, and we had a fabulous time. Again, kudos to BMDS's entire team for, again, another successful pantomime. I also want to highlight the Bermuda National Trust Christmas Walkabout. I joined the many thousands of residents who joined the trek to the east. The traffic heading to the east, as many can attest to, was backed up all the way coming from town. I want to thank the Minister Owen Darrell for having a ferry that was available to provide an alternative means of transport. And I will definitely be exploring that option next time, because traveling to the east with a car full of my children and grandchildren was an experience in and of itself. We did join the many throngs of people who parked at the ferry reach in hopes to join the minibuses service that was taking families to join the event. Unfortunately, by the time we got there, the parking area was pretty full, and we were at Stone Crusher's corner, which was very far away from where the free buses were. So we jumped on the public transport, and we had a phenomenal experience on the bus. The bus driver was in great spirits. The members of the public who were also on the bus heading towards the events also were in high spirits. So we enjoyed our bus ride. I'm really excited to say that there were 4 generations in my family that joined the event, and it was very, very special for us to have 4 generations. It was one of my mom's favorite pre-Christmas events. St. George's looked glorious. She was absolutely beaming with Christmas spirit, and my granddaughters in particular enjoyed the appearance of snow in the walk around. So I took particular joy in introducing my grandchildren to some of the UNESCO World Heritage sites, including the Old Rectory, Bridge House, Buckingham, the Stewart Hall. All were open for free, and it was a real pleasure for me to introduce my grandchildren to those spaces. The square was alive with a wonderful selection of entertainment. And Madam President, if I may, I'd just like to highlight those that lineup, which included the Bermuda Regiment and Corpse Drums Band, the Bermuda Island Pipe Band, the Bermuda Highland Dancers, the Bermuda School of Music, the Bermuda Dance Academy, Jackson School of Performing Arts, the In Motion School of Dance, and the Vision School of Dance. There were many vendors also on hand to fill our bellies with wonderful foods. So thank you for their ongoing participation. This is the 3rd year the Bermuda National Trust has partnered with Butterfield Bank's Toys for Tot program. So attendees were also encouraged to bring unwrapped donations to support that worthy initiative. I cannot finish without also recognizing the sponsors to the event. Event like this, of this magnitude, cannot occur without the corporate and government sponsorship that happens to make such a wonderful event a success. So the corporate sponsors included Butterfield Bank, HSBC, Gosling's, Butterfield Vallis, the Corporation of St. George's, Belco, the Bermuda Economic Development Corporation, and of course the Department of Culture. Again, kudos to Bermuda National Trust for, again, a wonderful, wonderful event. This is their 45th year of hosting this event. So look forward to many more joining them for many more years to come. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Lauren Bell. Would any other senator care to speak? It's over to you then. Minister Wilkerson, Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam President. Rather than adjournment, I would like to speak
No,
on
no, I was
conduct.
calling
Okay,
on you
thank
too,
you.
yes.
Okay, thank
to,
you. I wasn't sure I
Not for the
indicated.
adjournment.
I wasn't sure I indicated that I wanted to speak, but I do. First, let me start with condolences. It is really sad to have to acknowledge the passing of Kehinde George, who was the president of the Bermuda Bar Association. For me, Madam President, she was a whole lot more. She was a mentor. She was the preeminent insolvency lawyer in Bermuda, and she had many years of leadership in the restructuring bar, RISA. I worked with her. I joined ASW, which is the only firm I've been in private practice in Bermuda, because she was there. I had indicated that I wanted to work in a firm where I could do commercial litigation, and I was pointed in that direction. And as you say, the rest is history, and that was in 2001 that I started with ASW. But more than being a preeminent leader in her craft, Madam President, Kehinde George, a partner in that law firm for 25 years, one of the founding partners, she was a quiet powerhouse of a trailblazer. And she was that example for a younger Black woman lawyer to look up to. And when she had her daughter, Kayode, who's now 23, that baby was in the office. So she was modeling an example of work-life balance, what priority looks like back then, Madam President. And we were at her wake last night. The funeral was on Sunday afternoon. But it was inspiring for me to know that she had the same impact on so many other younger women who came to the legal profession after me. She will be sorely missed. She was not ill. Her death was sudden. And I guess the message, Madam President, is that we really should be living every day as if it were our last, but that we also should be walking through this life with grace. And she was that person, always had an amazing smile on her face. She was able to give you guidance and correction by offering that issue that you hadn't spotted, but she did it in such a very humble way that, maybe those of us who were impacted by her could put together all of our thoughts, because we think a person like her, she should have written a book before she left this earth so suddenly. And I just continue to hold her family, her twin sister Taiwo, her daughter Kayo, in prayers and thoughts as they navigate life suddenly without her. But on to celebratory things, Madam President, I would like to join Senator Cunningham in acknowledging the ABER event, which honored industry leaders. And on the afternoon of that event, which was attended by Senator Dion Smith, along with Senator Cunningham and myself, Senator Minister Crystal Caesar was also at the event. The afternoon festivities honored Brian O'Hara for his contribution in the charitable space, and he has been a giant in supporting charities in Bermuda. And I was unable to attend the lunchtime
festivities,
but I want to take this forum to say, Brian, that I acknowledge and support and am grateful for everything that he has done, certainly because as that event took place in O'Hara House, which is named for him. And finally, Madam President, I want to congratulate the Caesars Pharmacy family on 30 years of business and contributing to Bermuda. And they also held a series of events over the weekend in Somerset. Minister Caesar was there with me at their event honoring unsung heroes almost, most of them from Somerset, and those included Sonia Smith as an athlete in Commonwealth Games and an Olympian, Winston Reed, his contribution to cup match, Gledwin Lambert, his contribution to sailing in Bermuda, Brian Wellman, renowned Olympian triple jumper, Clyde Best, the legendary and none other, Larry and Macio Hunt, who have been pioneers and just volunteering in promoting and giving their time to Pee Wee soccer, which is the cutest thing ever. They provide everything, including the uniforms, and these little kids just show up but you know, when you're in a soccer Pee Wee league and you're 4 or 5, you're learning a lot more than football. You're learning respect, you're learning camaraderie, you're learning, team spirit, consistency, and being a friend, which is the thing. Jerry Swan, Hetty Ann Gilbert, and Sean were also honored in that evening. So congratulations again to Cheryl and Rotimi Martins. They are the backbone behind so many community efforts in Sandy's. And I wanted to take this forum to acknowledge and thank them for their hard work. Thank you, Madam President.
And thank you, Minister of Justice Wilkerson, for your comments. I would like to associate myself with the condolences that Minister and the Attorney General expressed for Kayinde George, because I had planned to be at the funeral myself, because I live next door to her family, and so I just wanted to do that because, yes, she passed before her time, really. But she's left legendary opportunities and encouragement for anybody following in her footsteps. So with that, thank you, and it's over to you for adjournment.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the Senate now adjourn until December 17th.
Thank you. Would any senator care to speak on the motion to adjourn? Senator Lindsay Simmons, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise today with deep concern. As we know, words carry power. What we say to one another matters. Madam President, I'm sure we all have heard the saying, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That saying, Madam President, is simply untrue. Words do hurt, and their impact can last far longer than any physical injury. Madam President, I remember when I once broke my bone in my arm. I remember the pain, but I no longer feel it. It faded with time, Madam President. But the feeling you experience when someone disrespects you, when someone speaks to you in a way that diminishes your humanity, that feeling does not go away. It lingers. It resurfaces when we witness similar behaviors repeated in this honorable house. Madam President, on July 23rd, 2025, I was both shocked and disappointed to hear a member of the opposition question my selection to attend an upcoming conference. The former senator in question asked why I had been chosen and not him. I responded simply and truthfully that representative was selected from both parties. An OBA MP was chosen and I was selected to represent the PLP. However, Madam President, the senator went on to say that he had planned to protest my selection until he realized that one of his own colleagues had been chosen to attend. But Madam President, what is most troubling is the nature of his planned protest. He stated to me that a white person had been chosen over a black person. This happened in our break room.
Point of order.
Senator Cunningham, yep, point of order.
Sorry, I don't believe that that's exactly what he said, and I just.
Madam President, I think that is exactly what he said. I was deeply insulted, not only because I am a mixed race woman, but I am a proud daughter of a black man. Such a comment clearly is unacceptable in this honorable chambers, even in the break room. Madam President, I must add that I was again deeply shocked on Friday, December 5th, when one of my colleagues, a minister that sits in another place, was chastised in a manner entirely unbecoming of a member of these houses. The minister was compelled to give an emotional response, and I felt his words in my soul. His experience reminded me of how I felt when a former senator once spoke to me in a disrespectful manner. No member should be subject to such treatment, and no one serving in the public should be made to defend their dignity in this way. Madam President, the irony of these moments is that on July 23rd, I also rose to table the Human Rights Commission annual report, a report that underscores the importance of equality, respect, and human dignity. These are values that all of us, especially in these chambers, should reflect both in our words and in our actions. Madam President, as parliamentarians, we must do better. We are called to serve all people, to lead with integrity and rise above petty politics and diverse rhetoric. I will continue to serve with dignity, fairness, and conviction that our diversity is not a weakness, but a strength. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Lindsay Simmons. Would any other senator care to speak on the motion to adjourn? Yes. Senator Tariq Dunbar Smith, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and good afternoon again to the listening audience and to my Senate colleagues. I'll be quick, looking at the time. I just want to speak to the public and the listening audience about the amount of road traffic collisions we have had on our island in recent times. I am out on the road quite often, as I do nights and weekends, drive taxi and limo, and I drive folks around, and sometimes I cringe when a bicycle overtakes me. I'm almost afraid of what I will encounter when I go around the corner. I don't want to find anyone lining the road. I have been witness over the years to 4 road traffic fatalities, and it is impactful and it impacts you for quite a while afterwards. We've also just had a death of a 17-year-old young man. I won't mention his name. I do know him. It hurts my heart. We had a few very serious road traffic accidents in the past couple days. So I ask that the public and those in the listening area, and even parents, to please speak with your young folk about their speeds, their overtaking on corners, because we are losing lives, and we are also having people with very, very severe injuries that impact their future. So if we can stress, as I had a conversation with my 15-year-old last night, who's on his way back from UK from school, about his bike when he goes 16, and I said, you can go around a go-kart track at 80 miles an hour, but you will not be riding a bike around Bermuda. And I said that as a father who is impacted by this because of the emotion. And I'm sure as time goes on, we may reconsider. But at the moment, Roman ain't getting a bike and he's not happy about it. But this is because of the impact that these accidents have had on me as a human, as a Bermudian. So please, for the families, speak to your young ones about the way that they travel. I have been a lucky young man at 25 years old. I lost a finger and I lacerated my face severely in a bike accident, and it impacted me where I started to take my time. I do know that sometimes we are late, but when you are late, you are late. It cannot change the fact you are late. So please, let's be more cautious on our roads, not just in bicycles, but that is most of the accidents are in bicycles, but in our 4-wheel vehicles as well. Thank you, Madam President.
And thank you, Senator Tariq Dunbar Smith. Would any other senator care to speak on the motion to adjourn? Yes. Senator Lauren Bell, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I would just like to provide the Senate as well as the listening audience with a very brief report of the 68th Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Conference. This conference was hosted in Bridgetown, Barbados, on October the 5th to October the 12th. And the gathering brought together speakers, parliamentarians, clerks, and parliamentary staff from all across the Commonwealth to examine the challenges, opportunities facing democratic legislatures in the era of a rapidly global changing environment. Now, the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, also known as the CPA, was established in 1911 and today comprises over 180 branches representing 56 member states, including national, state, provincial, and territorial legislatures. The CPA membership represents nearly a third of the world's population. So it's a very powerful and impactful association. The main purpose of the CPA is to advance parliamentary democracy by fostering cooperation amongst the Commonwealth legislatures. And its goals include supporting professional development of the parliamentarians, creating nonpartisan platforms for dialogue on shared democratic challenges, upholding the Commonwealth Latimer House principles, which is the cornerstone standards of governing the separation of powers, ethics, transparency, and responsible governance, and also strengthening good governance, accountability, and the rule of law across all member parliaments. The purpose of the annual conference, so the CPA General Assembly was presided over by the CPA President, which was the Senator Honorable Reginald Farley, JP, President of the Senate of Barbados, and was attended by members from over 121 CPA branches. So 121 out of the 108 member branches were in attendance. The annual conference serves as the CPA's preeminent forum for reviewing global and regional issues affecting the Commonwealth. It also gives an opportunity to share best practices on legislative procedure, oversight, integrity, and constituency engagement. It facilitates peer-to-peer learning among the parliamentarians, and it set the CPA's forward agenda through plenarians, workshops, and standing committee meetings. The conference plays a vital role in renewing the Commonwealth's collective commitment to democratic resilience and ethical parliamentary conduct. I had the opportunity to attend many of those workshops and have come away a better parliamentarian as a result. So I thank for the opportunity to have attended. I want to highlight in particular the Commonwealth Bermuda Parliamentarians, also known as CWP, which aims to promote greater representation of women in Parliament. It also builds on the capacity of women elected to Parliament to be more effective in their roles and to encourage gender perspectives in all aspects of our roles. Now, CWP has been active in advocating for gender-sensitive parliaments and has published guidelines to help parliaments implement these principles. The CWP also mobilized behind global campaigns to challenge gender biases and inequality, celebrating women's achievements and promoting a more inclusive world. Now, CWP represents over 3,000 women parliamentarians in the over 180 Commonwealth national members and the subnational parliaments across all 9 regions of the CPA. Madam President, I just want to pause here because I learned something while in attendance to one of the workshops for the CWP, which I was not aware of prior to my attendance. I learned that the first informal meeting of women parliamentarians was held in 1899 at the 35th Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference, which was also held in Barbados. And this first meeting of women parliamentarians was initiated by Bermuda's very own Senator Norma Cox Asquith. And I want us to pause here for a minute, Because given the synopsis of the role and function and what the CWP has been able to accomplish since that first initial meeting in 1989, it is very impressive for that to have been spearheaded by a Bermudian. And we recognize while we are a small territory, we are powerful. And it was the foresight of Senator Norma Athwood that set this, the CWP into motion. And the impact that CWP has had throughout the Commonwealth is very, very impressive. So I'm sure that it's a great source of pride, not just for myself, but for all members of the Senate as well as all Bermudians. So some of the key outcomes of the conference, there was a focus on digital democracy and AI governance. So the workshops focused on opportunities for risk and associated with artificial intelligence, online misinformation, and cybersecurity threats to the electoral integrity. And this is something that we in Bermuda have to be mindful of, the impact of rampant misinformation that we find online. Member parliaments were committed to advancing regulatory frameworks that protect democratic institutions while also in supporting innovations. The second key outcome was climate resilience and economic renewal. As many small islands and developing states continue to face severe climate-related risks, the conference highlighted inter-parliamentary cooperation on climate finance, resilience planning, and sustainable development. Thirdly, there was the enforcement of the parliamentary integrity standards, and this is really important for us. Delegates reaffirmed the CPA's central mission of strengthening ethical public life, particularly through the adherence of the CPA recommended benchmarks for democratic legislatures. There was a strong emphasis on transparency, anti-corruption safeguards, and the need for gender and youth inclusive parliaments. And finally, and the fourth key takeaway was strengthening public trust in democratic institutions. Across all sessions, delegates acknowledged the declining global trust in political institutions and emphasized the need for renewed parliamentary outreach, civic education, and ethical standards of conduct. Now, I was given this amazing opportunity to meet one of my political heroes, which was, of course, the Prime Minister of Barbados, the Honorable Maya Mottley. She provided a powerful keynote address who underscored the urgent need for democracies to assert the relevance and legitimacy in the lives of our citizens. She noted that democracy cannot be taken for granted, and it must actively be protected against polarization, misinformation, economic inequity, and the erosion of public confidence. Prime Minister Motley reminded the delegates that the Commonwealth's shared democratic traditions must be matched by shared commitments to accountability, transparency, and fairness. Her call, Madam President, was unmistakable. She called for parliamentarians to uphold the values they represent, not only through legislation, but also through personal example and institutional practice. Her speech emphasized and linked to the CPA benchmarks for democratic legislatures, and she placed emphasis on democratic accountability, civic trust, inclusive participation, and the protection of democratic norms. In essence, Prime Minister Motley reminded us that the strength of democracy lies not in constitutional text alone, but in the daily actions of those elected to serve. Madam President, in conclusion, I just want to highlight that the 68th CPA conference reaffirmed the Commonwealth's commitment to defending and renewing democratic values in an increasingly complex world. And for us here in Bermuda, the message is very clear. Our work as parliamentarians must continually reflect the highest standards of integrity, transparency, and service. As Prime Minister Motley so forcefully emphasized, democracy survives only when its practitioners uphold the trust placed within them. I encourage all Bermuda parliamentarians to pause and reflect on our individual responsibility to uphold the highest standards and principles of democracy when carrying out our duties. Thank you, Madam President.
And thank you, Senator Lauren Bell. Would any other senator care to speak on the motion to adjourn? Senator Misha Fabler, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. And so I'll be brief. I just wanted to add my contribution to the debate this afternoon before we wrap. And I want to preface this by saying that the content I'm going to cover, logical fallacies, are thankfully not something we are regularly presented with in this House. You know, in the Senate, we tend to be rather collegial, as you've seen today in our debate of the bills that undoubtedly benefit the people of Bermuda. But I wanted to spend some time kind of going to highlighting a few of the logical fallacies I often see presented when we debate the issues of the day in general across the island. And I'll try to provide some examples to illustrate what they are. And so just as a basis, a logical fallacy is a misconception resulting from a flaw in reasoning or a trick or illusion in thoughts that often succeeds in obfuscating facts or truths. And they are generally categorized into groups, formal or informal, and a formal logical fallacy can be seen within the argument's form. Every formal fallacy is a non sequitur, which is an argument where the conclusion does not follow the premise, whereas an informal fallacy can be seen within the argument's form, which is argument whose proposed conclusion is not supported by the premises. This creates an unpersuasive or unsatisfying conclusion. And I'll provide a couple of each. Just the formal fallacy I wanted to highlight is affirming the consequent, which is in the case where you assume that because the consequent or the then part of your condition is true, that the if part or the antecedent is also true. And just as an abstract example, if the moon is full, then I like pizza and I love pizza. So that must mean that the moon is full, which is in fact affirming the consequent. It is not a full moon today, I don't believe. And we don't need to look forward. My colleague highlighted some of the debate in another place where that approach was used. The conclusion was drawn that was not supported by the antecedent. That if this has happened, then such must be the case. I think even I won't revisit debate, and I'll leave it at that. An informal logical fallacy that is often used is the straw man argument, and this is when someone misrepresents the argument so that it becomes easier to attack. And kind of a topical one is around the prospect of us becoming a full member of CARICOM. Often you'll hear people say things like, well, CARICOM has freedom of movement or intends to have freedom of movement within the single market, and as such will be overrun by member nation citizens, and kind of ignoring the reasoning why welcoming our cousins from the South is a bad thing. It ignores the fact that having open borders is an optional component of full CARICOM membership. And finally, I think probably another logical fallacy type that we've seen recently, or generally, I would even argue, if you are kind of the glutton for punishment that reads the comment sections on articles in the daily news, is ad hominem. And that is the approach trying to undermine the opponent's arguments by personal attacks through attacking their character or skill level, etc., as opposed to addressing the ideology or idea that is being debated. And the ad hominem attack uses an accepted fact about a person to undermine their credibility despite the lack of causal connection between the two parts of the argument. And just as an abstract example, Susan is an avid hunter and therefore she cannot possibly support gun control. And even though the hunter is being used in a negative characteristic in that case, it is not necessarily true that she is opposed to gun control. Susan may generally support it. And so those three, just to kind of briefly highlight a few logical fallacies that you may be presented with as you navigate the world. I encourage you to read more about them, to enhance your ability to identify them, and encourage you to also kind of call on that person to, base their argument in fact and focus on the ideals, the substance of the thing being debated. And on that note, I would like to conclude. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Fabula. Would any other senator care to speak on the motion to adjourn? Hearing none, then senators, we will adjourn now till December the 17th. And I thank you all for your attendance and input this morning. Have a blessed week.